At that time, the world around us was shattered. The comrades with whom our hero fought side by side, risking their lives, 10 great knights who defended the continent, used up all their mana and vitality. The earth is polluted and overflowing with negativity and cruelty. All that happened was a tragedy brought about by the actions of one scumbag, the king of demonic beasts, gluttony. Our hero came to the feet of the monster to fight him. His name was Tiny. The monster laughed at him. When he heard the man's intentions, he said he recognized his strength, but he was a little too low to reach out and take his life. At that moment, the hammer in Tiny's hands glowed with energy. The guy, gathering all his strength, jumped to attack his opponent. Lightning exploded again and again. But the monster only laughed at the man's attempts to defeat him. It told him to give up already. The boy, in a fit of rage, screamed for the monster to shut its mouth. In the exact second, he slammed his hammer into the ground at the monster's feet, causing the meteor to explode. The beast howled in pain. The man growled, making a lot of noise. The meteor fire burned the monster through, and our hero said it was finally quiet. Tiny held up his hammer and said he would die too. As he deployed his mana supply, he realized it wasn't enough. The guy thought his life was screwed up from the start. He remembered his childhood years. Only famous knights and aristocrats are trained in mana training methods. All he had at his disposal was trial and error. Having risen to knighthood, our hero thought that all trivial problems from now on were behind him. But was that really the case? Today, he is overwhelmed with regret. Had he started his mana training with the proper methods, he might have been able to protect the continent, if not everyone. His mana reserve was depleted, and demonic King Gluttony was only a captain of the 7th Army Corps. The young man couldn't even imagine how strong the others could be. The boy's musings were interrupted. Someone called his name. Turning around, he saw the wounded but still alive Sword Emperor of Esgard von Valentius. The old man said he didn't have long to live, but before he went to the next world, he wanted to ask the boy a question. Why didn't he run away from the battlefield? Tiny was a little confused. He wondered why such a question had arisen. The Emperor said he'd heard our hero was born into poverty. Doesn't he have something to protect? Surely he must have suffered for a long time. The young man said with a smirk that he was curious about what the old men were discussing before leaving our world. Tiny replied that he didn't like looking weak. A real man should keep his head held high. Desertion was not for him. Esgard von Valentia, upon hearing these words, laughed out loud. The guy came closer and said he could see the old man had strength left for laughter. The Emperor stopped laughing, said the boy had convinced him. He believed in his talent. His pride helped him become one of the 10 great knights. So when he returns, he must seek out the old man. The young man looked skeptically at his interlocutor. He asked how to understand it. The old man said that if the young man just appeared to him, he would not believe him. So he must memorize one of his secrets. Turning the ring on his finger, the Emperor revealed that his unborn daughter was Lily, after his and his wife's favorite flower. Tiny couldn't understand what was happening. Some unknown energy swept over him. Closing his eyes forever, the old man added that he wasn't fond of the flower, but that was the most critical part of the secret that Tiny must not forget. Fainting, the Emperor asked to be found as soon as possible. The young man could not understand the old man's words, but he felt that he too was losing consciousness. When he woke up, the guy couldn't understand what was going on. He saw a familiar room, and there was a little boy lying on a bed. Our hero thought he was already dreaming before going to the next world, and he has a dream. He sees his painful childhood, where he witnessed the death of his sister. The boy hid the gold ring. His sister covered it up and got hit. Then for days, the boy was on the verge of life and death. His sister nursed him without tending to his wounds. From this, she left our world. When they entered the boy's house, 2 angry men who had beaten them up the day before kicked the girl. She fell to the floor. Even after realizing she was no longer breathing, they took the body. These barbarians were discussing how to make money off an undead girl. They were listing unimaginable options. Tiny lay there and agonized at the thought that he couldn't protect his sister even in his sleep. He struggled to get his weary body to move. And then it happened. An unknown energy filled his body. He was able to stand up. With a shout of "Stop it!" he lunged at the offenders and pushed them away from his sister. The men thought that the death of his sister made the guy go crazy. They came at him with kicks and fists. They demanded that he go away. The boy struggled to cover his sister's body. The men turned and walked away. Tiny lay there crying. After a while, he came to his senses and thought something was happening. It's a dream that has haunted him his whole life, but suddenly the ending changes. How come? The boy looked at his hands. They were glowing from the influx of energy. He thought that last time he couldn't even use mana. He remembered the old man saying he should look for him when he returned. That's when Tiny realized that the Emperor had brought him back in time. It was all happening in real life. Our hero realized that now he could change the future. The boy cried. He scolded the old man for choosing this moment and not sending him away a couple of days earlier. After calming down, Tiny realized that the Emperor lacked confidence in his strength. There was no reason to be angry. He decided to use it as an opportunity to say goodbye to his sister, which had never happened in his previous life. Remembering that he must seek out the Emperor as soon as possible, the boy decided that as soon as he had sorted out what he had to do, he would go straight to the search. The boy knew that the wolf was to blame for his sister's death. He'd had a hard time dealing with him in his previous life. This time he promised to exact his revenge. But first, he had to visit his sister at the graveyard. The girl Irina wasn't related to him. They just both had dark hair. It was a rarity on their continent. In their world, black is considered the color of bad luck. Therefore, the boy was shunned and bullied by many. To Irina, when she met the boy, he reminded her of her dead brother. She named him Tiny and cared for him as if he were her own. The boy cried with regret that he would have to say goodbye to her without ever repaying her for all the good she had done. The younger brother correctly said goodbye to his sister. One of the girls I knew looked at the boy with sympathy. She thought he wasn't himself. It was Irina's friend Emma. She thought the boy was in such a state because of his sister's death. The girl recalled going to the guy's house and seeing the boy sitting next to his friend's body and eating. She was amazed at how eating peacefully at this time was possible. The wounds on the baby's body magically disappeared. After eating, he shouldered his sister and carried her himself. When Emma tried to stop him, the boy said it was all right. Emma asked why he only listened to Irina and ignoring her at a time like this. To the girl's surprise, Tiny thanked her for the food and promised to repay her for her help. The little boy made his own funeral arrangements for Irina. Emma stood there and couldn't understand what was happening in Tiny's head. Meanwhile, the boy stood thinking that this was the only way to repay her for her kindness. He pondered that there was nothing to blame himself for and tutted his gaze. Irina would be against it. The little boy remembered how his smiling sister had taught him to always keep his head held high, to be ashamed of nothing and to look forward. She never stopped repeating those words. Tiny clenched his fists, raised his head to the sky, and mentally appealed to his sister, asking her to watch over him from heaven. He had promised that day that he would have no regrets in this life. A month later, the boy was trudging down the road toward the clifftop house. The baby was full of energy and confident in himself to move forward. On the way to the house, he met two guys. They reasoned that the tax collector was about to come to their home. The boy sternly asked the boys if Wolf was in place. One of the men, intent on hitting the kid, headed toward him asking how dare he say that name out loud. The boy intercepted his attacker's arm and broke it. The boy smirked at the words he wasn't allowed to say his name. While one of the guards lay on the ground complaining of pain in his arm, the kid advanced on the second. The second guard looked at him fearfully, wondering why he acted like that. He was drunk. With the thought that it's just a kid, throw him out and that's it. The man tried to lift the boy up by his pecs. But something was wrong. The little baby weighed like a piece of iron. Tiny smiled and told the guard that he weighed more than he looked. He is overflowing with energy. Tiny advised his opponent not to overwork himself. Saying it was all for nothing, the boy kicked the man. He flew a few meters away. The boy realized that he was all right now. His manatee was in place. In his previous life, he was in the wrong position, which was causing the discord. The secret of the secret technique that Tiny invented is to use two bodies to multiply his strength, due to the perfect alignment of the mana body, and your own. The effects of this secret technique are sound, but you have to eat well to stay in shape. Emma helped. The poor girl was amazed that the boy once ate her 10 days' supply of food. Approaching the man, the boy said that by creating a monothelo this time, he understood why it had turned out badly in his previous life. The enemy, not understanding anything, tried to escape from the pursuer. The boy, he continued to reason. He said it was easier for weak, newly awakened mana to take its proper place in a wounded body. Tiny caught his opponent by the leg. The frightened man shouted, asking what he was talking about. The kid spun the man in the air and said he was thankful for beating him to a pulp. After the boy let go of the enemy, he broke through the gate and flew straight into the house's door. At that moment, those inside the room were startled by an explosion blasting through the doors. One of the men said they seemed to have an uninvited guest. In the doorway, the silhouette of a small boy appeared out of the dust clouds. The people present recognized him as a little beggar. They were surprised that he had come alone. The grown man asked the toddler what he hoped for by coming here unarmed. Tiny asked what made them think he didn't have a gun, and grabbed the big man who had been responsible for his sister's death by the leg. Looking at the frightened bandit, the boy said, "This is it," and pulled his leg. Tiny began to spin with the furious force of a man. He was like a meteor blowing everyone in his path. The toddler then threw the man at the second perpetrator of his sister's death. The first floor of the house became quiet. Tiny said that the pawns were finished. Looking up, he saw the people watching. The boy said that now it was just the Randers brothers. The men were armed with swords, but our hero did not falter and ordered them down. Seeing the glow coming from the kid, one of the brothers noted that he was using mana. The Randers gloated that the body of a mana-wielding human could be sold at an inflated price. The boy eyed the bandit's leg, which he used to fight off the others. He reasoned that it had fallen into disrepair. He remembered how his elders scolded him for using humans instead of weapons during his training. The old man said to train in martial arts instead. The Randers brothers were already on their way to attack the boy. Tiny was contemplating whether to put up a noble fight right now. The brothers swung their swords swiftly, but the boy anticipated their movements. When they became confused, the boy dealt his opponent several blows with hand-to-hand combat alone. When no one was left in the way, the boy advanced into the house's interior. Wolf, the leader of the invaders, was in the room. He didn't look around to see who was there. The boy remembered being greatly surprised in his past life that the wolf, who had led an outlaw life in a remote territory, had turned out to be a beastman rather than a man. Their race is considered one of the strongest. Moreover, he is a silver wolf, a special creature among the beastmen. Only direct descendants of the imperial family of werewolves exhibited this characteristic. Tiny had never understood why someone so famous would live in a place like this. In a previous life, the boy had barely managed to destroy it, so there was no time for questioning. But now our hero decided to beat him up and find out what he wanted. Tiny's thoughts were interrupted by Wolf. He asked why the boy had done this to his men. The boy, smirking, asked what wasn't clear to him. He wondered if those were the last words he wanted to say. The wolf was filled with rage, told Tiny he was an arrogant brat, started threatening violence. The beastman turned into a werewolf. Our hero didn't understand what was wrong. He asked the monster why his fur was not gray. Standing in front of the giant monster, the boy asked, "Is he the son of a dog or something?" After saying that, the beastman became furious. The monster lunged at the boy. He barely dodged its claws. The boy thought he was stronger and faster than the Randers brothers. Dodging another attack, he noted that he was weaker than what he had been in his past life. The boy managed to grab his opponent by the nose. At that, Tiny said that he didn't think he'd come back for such a pathetic spectacle. Tiny had a beastman mate who taught him how to deal with members of their race when they fall into madness. The werewolf lunged. The boy showed great agility in dodging its claws. After exhausting his opponent, the boy went on the attack, saying that a good whipping is the cure for dog rabies. As he fought the enemy, Tiny recalled the words of an acquaintance who said he could treat them more roughly. The beastmen have an excellent regenerative ability. After the beast hit the wall again, a small amount of plaster sprinkled, and something glowing appeared in the crack. Tortured by so many attacks, the beastman turned back into a human again and lost consciousness. When the wolf came to his senses, our hero stood beside him. The frightened half-beast asked what the kid was doing here. What does he want? The boy, stretching his arms, said that this time it wouldn't end with a broken spine. The wolf trembled with fear of being beaten again. Tiny ordered that he should vigorously beg for his sister's forgiveness. Hopefully it would help calm her down. The angry boy held his hand in the air and said how much he wanted to wring the monster's neck. The frightened man threw his hands up in prayer and began to apologize to Arena, saying he was sorry. The boy looked at his defeated adversary and said that as much as he wanted to bring his remains to his sister's grave, she would not want to meet him in the afterlife. Tiny began to question Wolf about why the beastmen lived in places like this. And then the boy noticed a red glowing stone on the floor. He bent down and picked it up. He had not found such a stone in his previous life. As soon as Tiny picked up the stone, red-colored energy began to ooze out of it. He guessed it was demonic energy. A moment later, from this blob of energy, a huge image of a chained wolf appeared above the boy's head. The boy froze in surprise. He had not expected to see such a thing. Tiny remembered that in a past life, his girlfriend had taken him to the forest to show him the mystical creatures that lived there. Mystic creatures are creatures that have appeared as their organs accumulate mana over the course of several centuries. The boy replied he didn't know they lived outside of Elfheim as well. Spirits are a rare phenomenon. The girl laughed, saying that the young man called the souls of animal spirits, and then she asked, showing the luminous stone, if he knew what the essence of a spirit was. Her friend held a stone in her hand from which streams of green energy were flowing. Tiny realized that he was holding a spirit stone. The boy looked at the wolf and couldn't understand where he got such a precious object. Turning his attention to the chains restraining the animal, the boy realized he was in a strange state. He wondered why the spirit stone contained energy peculiar to demonic beasts. After thinking for a few seconds, the kid decided he needed to get rid of that energy first. After hitting the stone, the shackles fell off the wolf. He stood up to his full height and howled. The boy saw the spirit's memories. Some suspicious people surrounded him. Using demonic energy, they overpowered the animal. It was all about obtaining the spiritual stone. For some reason, they gave that stone to a child. These bad people are stealing the spirit stone to create a beast man, and this transformed baby is a wolf. The boy stood looking at the frightened man in front of him. He quietly asked, "Did someone create him?" In this life, the boy had come too soon, and he hadn't fully absorbed the spirit stone. The wolf spirit wanted to attack the man who had tormented it all these years. But the boy stopped him, said he had to suffer properly before he died. Tiny wondered. The beast understood him. He never knew he was predisposed to spiritual magic. The boy remembered his friend's words. She had said that a person could become a spiritual mage if they had a pure soul and a decent amount of mana. Only children are innocent enough to do such a thing. Scratching the back of his head, the boy noted that Astina had said something like that to him. And now he was a child. But turning back to Wolf, he added, not sure he was innocent enough. The wolf spirit touched its nose to our hero's forehead. The boy understood the animal. When he broke the enchantment, his mana penetrated the spirit stone, filling its chips. So they understood each other. Simply put, now the wolf spirit and the boy could make a pact. The wolf nodded, and the boy held his hand, telling him he agreed. Tiny remembered Astina's words. Spirits don't need constant attention like magic. As long as mana sustains their existence, they will help. Most spirits grow stronger, matched by their mage. This is why Astina is one of the 10 great knights. Before making a pact with the man, the wolf spirit barked. The boy realized that he wanted to ask for something. The boy realized that the animal was asking for revenge for him. The kid assured the spirit that it was simple. He was going to destroy anyone associated with demons anyway. The last stage of contracting with the spirit is to agree on the rules of coexistence. The boy patted the animal's scruff. He asked what to name it. After shaking his paw and looking into his new friend's eyes, the boy gave him the name Moonwolf. The boy agreed. Tiny looked back at his former enemy and couldn't figure out what to do with him. He couldn't believe someone had used the spirit stone to create a beast eater. Judging from the fact that these people had demonic energy, they were demon followers. They are fanatics who have renounced the goddess and worship a race of demons. The boy remembered that they had caused a lot of trouble before the Demon King's army arrived, but he was in the labyrinth and didn't know the details. The boy kicked the praying man. Was he asked if the demon's followers had given him the spirit stone? But there was no answer. He was already completely out of his mind. The boy tried to bring him to consciousness. The wolf came to the rescue. He barked loudly. The man opened his eyes. Tiny asked where the people who gave Wolf Boy the spirit stone were. The frightened man began to say that their organization, but then he got down on all fours, grinned, and said they wouldn't let them in. He was just a test subject. They're powerful. And then the man exploded. He was wearing a spell, so he couldn't say anything extra. It seemed that the boy had heard something like that before in a past life. The boy remembered being threatened in his previous life that the organization would come after him. He didn't understand what was said then. After a few seconds of reminiscing, Tiny waved his hand, saying he wasn't one to ponder. Looking at the hole in the wall, the boy said it was worth it to give them back what he had taken. With the help of Wolf's hand, he opened a door bricked up in the wall. Behind the door was a treasure trove. The boy said that for his future comrade's trust, He took the ring with the image of a bird on it and said to grab this one. It was the Valentia family ring. The boy remembered having met a nice woman on a city street. She asked him his name. Saying that Tiny's name was charming and suited him, the girl took the ring off her finger. After giving the ring to the boy, she asked him to look for her later. Then she could help him. She also asked if he knew who she was. Anyone in the kingdom of Aslan knew her. It was Chloe von Valentia, the youngest daughter of the Sword Emperor of Esgard von Valentia. The girl was known for her good deeds, and for this, she was nicknamed an angel. She must have turned 16. She became an adult. The Valentia family has a tradition of going around their property at this age. Bring flowers to each temple and introduce yourself. That's why they met in the red light district. which the documents describe as the most remote place in the duchy. He didn't return the ring in his past life because he took revenge later. That made it hard for him to get support. But this time it will be different. With the ring, it's easier to face the Sword Emperor. The boy heard noises and screams coming from downstairs. Smiling, the boy thought they were right on time. Witnesses to what happened here a few minutes ago brought a man in armor. They said it was the work of the mana wielder. As they showed what had happened, they kept saying that the child had done it. They said that with this man's help, they'd have it sorted out quickly. Kicking those lying on the floor, the man in armor murmured that this was how the wolf watched over his subordinates. That man was the captain of the guard of the outer fortress of Phil Rem. He thought he could use what had happened as an excuse to raise his taxes. Then a boy started to come down the stairs. The people around started shouting that it was him. The guard asked if he had made a mess. On an affirmative answer, he sternly asked if the man realized what he had done. The boy calmly asked what the matter was. He had just dealt with the brigands. It was nothing. And they knighted. Why did they come here? Stopping on a flight of stairs, the kid said, assuming Wolf pays them well. The guard got angry. He started asking, but the guy had no sense of fear at all. Screaming, "How dare he!" the man tore out of his seat to grab the boy. Tiny realized the opponent was a mana wielder who hadn't even reached the second mana level. Easily fending off his attack, the boy realized that he could overpower him even now. However, he decided to limit himself to a show of strength. It's not worth feuding with Lord Phyllis for now, as he has many knights serving him. The boy needed to make the guard decide to back off on his own. The man wanted to attack again, but then a wolf appeared behind the boy. Captain Ram was startled when he realized it was a spirit. Tiny smiled, realizing that missing a spirit in such a tiny room was impossible. He said that if the warrior had calmed down a little, we could talk. The boy said, "We need to be honest. The guards don't care what happens here as long as the fee stays the same." Ram tried to clarify what he was implying. The kid replied that he would give him money instead of wolf. The guard turned from anger to mercy, said it was an unexpected offer from a kid, asked how old he was, and suggested he'd been magically transformed into a boy. The kid said, "To hell with magic. It's just that the local lands are his home." Many of the invaders know him for his dark hair. Ram inquired if he had 5 gold yangs. To the captain's surprise, the boy replied that he was joking. He was only given 1 yang. Tiny is willing to offer 1.5. The guard was infuriated by such a suggestion. The boy replied that they could fight here and now if the man didn't want to take the money. Putting the blade back in its scabbard, Captain Rem wailed that the world was going to hell. "I couldn't believe a child could talk like that." Tiny interjected, wondering what he would say to his suggestion. The guard turned around and headed for the exit, telling the man to pay on time. The bandits who had summoned the captain started pestering him, asking if he would leave it like this. He pushed them away. The boy gave the money to Rem and said that since the head of this place had changed, he should introduce himself to Lord Philes. Asked the captain to arrange a meeting. The man replied that he would pass on his request. He warned the boy that if he didn't pay the tax on time, he would know the Lord's fury. The boy smiled afterward and wondered if the following tax collection would occur. Tiny gave the remaining bandits 1 hour to gather the gang and bring all the women and beggars working here. He threatened to destroy one of them every minute they were late. Lastly, it was added that if anyone tried to escape, their spirit would hunt and finish them. The bandits rushed headlong to carry out the orders of the new chief. Looking at the ring, the boy said he'd be done here in less than a week. He added that he was looking forward to meeting Duke Valentia. The messengers came running out of breath. They reported that all were gathered here. Emma broke out of the general crowd and rushed toward Tiny with a shout. She took the boy's hand. She looked at his wounds and asked if it was the wolf who had beaten him again. The kid said it wasn't his blood, and the wolf died. There was panic in the crowd. They whispered and said Lord Philesa would not be happy about what to do now. The boy sat there thinking that everyone was scared. Everyone knows that Lord Phils had custody of the wolf. People started saying that if he turned his anger on them, using the excuse that they had gone against him. The boy replied that rebellion is a terrible crime. So what would happen to Lord Phils if it turned out that he had deceived Duke Valentius? The guards at the entrance to the fortress were talking. One of them said he hadn't seen Sir Ram lately. Is he on vacation? The other said that he was put on probation because of what happened at the invaders. A gang of bandits got into a fight. They all said they had met an enormous wolf monster chasing them. The former leader of the gang was disfigured beyond recognition, and all his money had vanished. The first asked what this had to do with Captain Remom. The second replied that he seemed to struggle talking to the new leader. Now visitors are complaining because all the establishments are closed. The city has not been profitable at all lately. Understandably, the Lord is upset. That's probably why he's called in a new leader. Our hero stood around the corner, listened to the guards talking, and remembered what had happened the other day. The boy showed the red book he had found in Wolf's safe. It was an account book. He asked what would happen to the Lord if the Duke found out about his deception. Emma couldn't understand what he was talking about. Tiny himself didn't find anything in it. But in a previous life, the Lord offered half of the wolf's wealth for it, and the chance to get a couple of friends away from the invaders. But now the boy has other priorities. Although Tiny is not the most intelligent person, his life as a knight has helped him realize that there is a hierarchy among aristocrats. And now, thanks to this book, Lord Phyllis will be finished. The boy turned to Emma. He said she didn't have to understand everything. Turning to everyone, he announced, "Wolf will not bother anyone else. Therefore, all his subordinates are free to go. And if anyone wants to take their anger out on him, this is the only chance." First, Emma and then the rest of the neighborhood rushed to the remains of the bandit, and shouting their curses and remembering all the wrongs, kicked him with all their might. The boy thought he didn't know how to comfort. However, he decided that money would be the best way to comfort, so he ordered the remaining bandits to bring the safe downstairs. The boy, addressing those he was forcing to stay here, said they could take as much as they could carry and get out of here. People were amazed that the kid was giving them money. They asked several times if it was true. Emma turned to her friend, Tiny, and asked how he was. Tiny replied that he was fine. He'd already taken the money he needed. The girl tried to explain to the boy, who, in her opinion, does not understand that no person in the world needs extra money due to his age. The boy stared at his friend and asked her where she thought the money came from. He added that he wouldn't need that much. The boy noticed that people who had never seen so many coins were greedy. Everyone was thinking about how they could take all the money for themselves. Then the kid showed the spirit of the wolf and explained that if anyone did anything bad to embezzle the money or told the Lord about the money, his buddy would tear that person to pieces. Emma was advised by a friend that if she was going to leave Philas, she should go to Diane. She should make sure to travel in groups and take a mercenary from the guild. The sister's friend was surprised and asked what about the boy. Our hero replied that he still had things to do. Looking at Tiny and his wolf spirit, the girl said he was strong and could care for himself. She would do as he told her, but the boy should visit her when he wants to take a break. The boy was pleased to see such concern. He smiled and thanked Emma. From that day forward, the red light district in Fields was closed for business. The fortress guards were standing around, remembering the new bandit leader's name. The boy came up to them and introduced himself. Tiny. The guards were surprised to see the child. They asked how long he had been standing there. They explained that the Lord and Lady lived here, and commoners like him shouldn't hang around. One of the guards clarified how he knew the name of the new bandit leader. Using his wolf spirit, the kid explained that he was the new leader. The guards became very frightened and fled from their posts. The kid went inside. He thought that wherever he went, he would get the same reaction. Inside, the boy was greeted by the Grand Master of the Order of the Knights of Phyllis Kron. He said he had heard about him from Rem, but he was younger than he had imagined. To the adult's surprise, the boy stated that it is customary to make guests stand while they are examined. The man was angry at such insolence and even reached for his sword, telling him to watch his tongue. To this behavior, the boy replied that he could advise Cran to do the same. Don't fool around and don't act as if the inn is more important than the Lord. Tiny stared at the master and said he was a guest in this house, but at that the knight tries to raise his sword at him. Has the man gone mad? The man blurted out in a rage that was more than he should have expected from a man with his past. The boy is breathing bile. At that moment, the boy thought he was facing the most rotten man in the whole knightly order. And he replied that the stench would likely come from his mouth. Blushing with anger, the man started to pull the blade from its sheath with a shout. The butler intervened, informing Kron that the Lord was expecting his guest. The man exhaled, he did, and asked me to forgive him for this behavior. While escorting the boy into the study, the master of the Night Order advised him to watch his manners. Unlike him, the Lord is a strict man. The boy agreed. The man was walking and seething inside. He thought he would immediately finish the boy off as soon as he was allowed. Approaching the massive door, Cran loudly reported that Mr. Tiny of the Nooks and Crannies had arrived. A voice from behind the door allowed entry. Crossing the threshold of the room, the boy was beginning to say that he asked to be forgiven for the... But then he was stunned, looking at the man sitting in the chair. He couldn't believe it was a lord. After only a moment of recovery, the boy crouched down on one knee and said he was honored to meet Lord Filesa. The lord asked about where the boy learned his manners. Tiny replied that he had practiced a little to be dignified in his presence. Lord Timon von Files sat on his couch. Smiling, he replied that the boy was good at pretending to be a knight. Looking at this man, the kid thought getting used to him wouldn't be easy. He thought back to a lord he knew in a past life. That man looked nothing like this man. He remembered that the last one had been addicted to illegal substances, so that's what he looked like before he succumbed to his addiction. The boy reflected that appearances were not important. The ledger he sent to Duke Valentius would finish him off. So, for now, a distraction would be necessary. The lord interrupted the boy's musings by saying he didn't seem to have honored Sir Kran with such a courtesy. Rising from his knees, the boy replied that it is possible to treat a master and his servants alike. Putting his hand to his heart, the little man said he would also like to enter the lord's service. Kran cried out in anger and surprise. The lord smirked and asked if the boy considered Sir Kran his rival. The young guest is aiming far ahead. Looking at the guest, the lord wondered if he was really young. Maybe he had the blood of dwarves or elves in him. The boy replied that all assumptions were nonsense. He turned 13 this year. Timon von Files replied, rising from the sofa, that he believed it was unimportant since the boy had come to them. As he approached the boy, the man said that he was asking him to be his servant and that he had done too much damage to the property. In Lord Tiny's eyes, he saw boiling rage. The man said he would like an explanation. The boy explained that he did it for his own good. Timon von Files raised his voice. He said he thought he was pretty smart, but didn't seem to understand how the world worked. Kran did not miss a moment and said that if the master wished, he would get rid of the guest in no time. The boy continued his speech. He asked if the lord knew that Duke Valentius had begun to fight the distribution of illicit substances in bordellos. The master of the knights was surprised at what he heard. Tiny said that the lord should know that Lady Valentia had visited the property some time ago. The boy got his information from her people. All he wanted to do was clean it up before it got messy. Saying that, the boy knew it was true. Even if they decided to check his words, they wouldn't find anything contradictory. The lord confirmed that he had heard about it. They planned something grand for their youngest daughter's coming-of-age ceremony. The master of the knights began to say the boy was talking the lord's teeth in, and there are plenty of bordellos in Valentino, so why are they... Lord von Files barked at his subordinate to watch his tongue. The guard apologized. The lord told the boy that his approach was primitive, but if what he said was true, the boy should be rewarded. Bowing, the boy thanked the lord, but the man said there was something else he needed to be sure of. The man, sitting on the couch and smoking a pipe, said that the boy's spirit was under control. The lord's eyes flashed with the fire of rage again. He asked if the boy had stolen it from the wolf's spirit stone. Tiny was in shock. How did he know about this? Behind his back, he sensed an invisible moonwalker. The heart of the boy and the spirit beat in unison. Through this connection, Tiny was able to see. A circle of demonic energy circled Lord Foul Fills. The boy thought the man was a black magician. Demons never lend their power without sacrifice. A second-level mage is either a lunatic who has ruined hundreds of people or has sacrificed the lives of dozens of people. It floated in the boy's mind that the thugs were going to give his sister's body to perverted necrophiliacs or sell it for organs. The Randers brothers then said that you can sell the remains of a mana owner at an inflated price. So he was the one who bought the bodies of dead people from the invaders, Tiny thought. He remembered that the dark mage was behind the wolf. The lord interrupted his thoughts, saying he was waiting for the boy's answer. Tiny said he didn't understand von Files' question. The lord shouted to his guard. He immediately began to draw his sword from its sheath. The boy realized that with his current strength, he could not overpower both men, so he summoned Moonwolf. The spirit animal instantly appeared, grinning at the enemies. Looking at what was happening, Lord Timon von Files said calmly that the kid was indeed the lord of the forest. The lord got angry and said that the great master of the knightly order of Philly's Cran was a useless stump. Pulling himself together, he reasoned that they should get a new test subject since things had turned out this way. Tiny couldn't believe his ears. A test subject? Does he want to use the boy instead of the wolf? Von Files asked Kran how strong the boy was. The guard replied that he would soon reach the second level. The man clarified that the guard wanted to say that the boy was equal to the knights. Kran assumed that either the kid was from a noble family where he had been trained to use mana since childhood, or that he was a genius. Looking at the boy, the Lord realized it was true. There was no way he could have learned it on his own. No strands of mana flowed out. Its circulation was relatively stable. The head of the knights confirmed that someone had taught him that. Turning to the boy, the Lord asked what he had to say. The boy wondered if he should make up for someone who had trained him. They probably wouldn't believe the story of how he taught himself. A way out was found. The boy said he was taught by his late parents before he arrived in Field. The boy began to tell the legend that he had learned this breathing technique from infancy. Gradually, his strength increased, and he realized that it was special. The Lord looked at the boy incredulously. Tiny grinned and mentally wished him luck finding out if that was the case. The Lord was taking in refugees from everywhere so the invaders could profit, and there was no way he could figure out the boy. Our hero added that the fact that he stands before them proves the truth of his words. The man, smoking again, said he believed the boy's words. Tiny thought it was easier to deceive the Lord than he'd expected. Looking at the kid with the demon's gaze, the Lord said he would get the details right. The boy was surprised to hear the he from the Lord. The man told the boy to live in the fort for a while. In response to the boy's surprise, he explained that ever since he'd destroyed the wolf, things had gone badly wrong. Now the Lord needed someone to blame. Tiny thought about what he had heard. Someone must take the blame. If it was one of the organization's members that Wolf had mentioned, it must be some scary dark mage if he's wary of him. It's dangerous. Again, the Lord's voice interrupted his train of thought. He said that the boy was not answering again. Timon von Phyllis smiled and asked the boy if he wanted to serve him. If so, his offer must be to his liking. Bowing, Tiny replied that since that was the Lord's order, he would obey. He added, "This wouldn't happen to be the Lord's guest of honor." The man confirmed what he had said, and asked him to mind his manners even more carefully in his presence. The boy bowed. He thought he still had a trump card up his sleeve. He pondered that for about 3 days, the Duke's men would find out if the ledger was real. It will take another 3 days to assemble a punitive army. Their journey to Phillies would take about 10 more days. On average, it would take 15 days. If the Lord's guest arrives after that, it will work out. The boy confused the Lord by asking when his guest would arrive. The man wondered why he needed to know. The kid snickered, saying he should know how much time he had to learn etiquette. Timon von Phyllis laughed at what he heard. He replied that in a week. The boy was upset that such a deadline didn't fit his plan. The boy stayed at the fortress. Warming up in the morning and thinking about the week's deadline, he sketched his options. There were only 2. The first is escape. The invaders should have escaped by now. It's worth following their lead if you want to leave. Bypassing the Lord's men will be easy. In that case, Tiny will be put on the wanted list. Meeting the Sword Emperor would be problematic. The boy has something to gain from it, so you should avoid everyone and everything that can cause him trouble in the future. Besides, the mere thought of running away makes Tiny angry. He thought he might not be strong enough right now, but finding a way to defeat his enemies had always been his method of dealing with issues. The second scenario concerns a guest who will be arriving in a week. Will it be an official visit? The man spoke in such a tone about the visitor as if he were some high-ranking aristocrat. But then why didn't the house make a fuss? That was suspicious. The boy concluded it was a secret visit. Whoever is behind the Lord can't just show his face in public. Tiny thought there would be a significant event in Fields before the secret guest arrived, to get people to pay attention to the place. Then the meeting will likely be postponed or canceled. The kid knew it was a significant risk, but that was his approach. Our hero knew he had to get stronger. After all, he would have to defeat the Lord and his knights. After finishing his workout, the boy decided it was time for a refreshment. The cook almost spilled his food in the dining room when he saw Tiny come in to eat. The people around him didn't understand how such a little boy could hold so much. Someone assumed he was a dwarf, and they had an appetite like orcs. Our hero, eating another meal, felt that the dissonance with the mantle was being corrected every time he ate. In other words, he only needs to eat well enough for his mana amount to increase. No need to even take medicines and herbs. Someone called out to the boy, saying, "So it's you." The boy looked up from his meal without taking his eyes off the food. A massive man in armor approached him. He asked if he was the homeless child who had learned etiquette from the dogs. The boy, continuing to chew his piece, muttered, "Ah," which surprised the man and angered him. The warrior turned to the boy, demanding respect in the presence of an adult. The boy grinned and waved a bone, which made it clear that he wouldn't show respect to a man who picked on a child. Poking a bone in his armor, our hero said he didn't understand whether the man was trying to make him laugh or challenge him to a fight. so he asked the man to decide for himself. The boy began pounding on his armor and insulting the man, demanding an answer. The man was filled with rage. With shouted insults, he slammed his fist on the table, promising to kick the boy's ass. A knight sitting at a nearby table began to calm the furious man, saying it was just a child. Kron approached him and asked him to be quiet and not to put down his irascible friend. Assessing everything that was going on, the boy sat on a chair and asked his attacker, the one curious about how strong he was. Flushed with anger, the man replied that he hoped the boy was as strong as he tried to appear. The boy thought he'd soon realize it, Captain. A lord, to be exact. He's the one behind this provocation. Everyone in the dining room went outside. This was where the duel was to take place. Knight Grant, rubbing his hands together, said he would put the boy in his place. Before the start of the fight, our hero asked his opponent if he was sure he would not regret it. The man only laughed at these words. Grant commanded Tiny to draw his sword. He'd have it out in a second. The boy scratched the back of his head with a detached look and answered, "Well, if he asked." The man wondered why the boy was not scared at all. Our hero kicked the knight in the leg. He held back his cry of pain. He clenched his fist tightly and attacked the boy. He dodged the attack safely. The kid kicked at his opponent's other leg so hard that it went under. The man exclaimed with overwhelming anger and pain, wondering if the boy was definitely level 1. Sir Grant looked at his battered legs. They burned as if on fire with pain. Overwhelmed with rage, the man thought feverishly that he couldn't lose like this. Tiny looked at what was happening and noted that his opponent was not simple. The man, gaining momentum, raised both hands and shouted insults, wanting to strike the boy from above. But he was nimble and squeezed between the giant's legs without getting a scratch. In the next instant, Tiny was already sitting on the knight's neck. He only had time to think when the boy managed to pull it off. Taking the man's head, the boy calmly told him not to be afraid. He wouldn't finish him off. In a second, the big warrior was on the ground. The boy stood rubbing his hands together, saying it was nothing. The gawkers gathered to watch the fight could not believe their eyes. Sir Grant had lost to the boy. The boy, standing in the crowd, looked intently into Kron's eyes. He turned away and walked. Tiny reasoned that he had purposely defeated the knight in full view of everyone, not relying on the moonwalker's strength. Pulling his comrade away, one of his acquaintances tried encouraging the man, saying that not everyone could do that. Looking after him, our hero thought that now the Lord would not dare to chase him away, and so the probability of success of his scheme increased. The boy felt dizzy as he looked at the departing people. The ground began to fall away from under his feet. Already lying on the ground, the boy muttered that, as expectedly, he had overdone it. But there was no other way. It was the only way the boy could overcome their level differences. Tiny had to use mana when he caught the enemy by surprise. Rising to his feet, the kid thought that he would have had a hard time in his past life. Manatelli's physical recovery was faster then, but there were times when it slowed down. However, now that the Manatello has merged perfectly with his, that won't happen. The boy was glad that even the extra training was easier now. Clenching his fist, the kid cheerfully thought that he could become stronger than he was before. Soon the Lord invited the boy to join him. He was really behind what was going on. The man said that he had underestimated Tinny. Our hero thanked him for his trust and for being tested. The boy was invited to the table and treated to a steak. Von Fee said there were still plenty of dishes to eat so he could fill up. The boy smiled and said that was a lot for breakfast. Lord Timon was surprised. He noted that it seemed to him such superhuman strength, capable of throwing a knight off from a good appetite. Eating the steak, our hero replied that the man had behaved too carelessly. The man said the boy was modest and added that he was looking forward to seeing what he would become in the future. It's a pity they don't have a teacher who could train such a genius. The Lord was surprised at the boy's answer. He said that most of the knights mentioned had raised themselves independently, without teachers. Continuing the meal, the boy added that all their power is ultimately from God. Von Fiels, meanwhile, was evaluating what he had seen and heard. He noted that the boy had studied history, and, as far as he could see, table etiquette. He concluded that this boy was clearly not a commoner. Our hero, eating another bite, thought he had studied all this in a past life. The Lord continued to analyze. He said that in their empire and in the surrounding states, dark-haired and dark-eyed aristocrats were rare. But if you consider those places, then the man had some considerations. Sending another piece into his mouth, the boy persistently did not understand what place was being discussed. The man kept talking, beginning to realize what the man meant. How unexpected. Who knew the boy would turn out to be so valuable? Tiny was perplexed as to what the man was carrying. Seeing the boy's surprise, the Lord lit a pipe and said that the man would explain everything. He was happy to hear from him yesterday. The boy looked apprehensively at the Lord. He thought that although he didn't know anything, the fact that this creep would become addicted to forbidden substances was particularly. Tiny, analyzing the man's energy, assumed he was content with the power of the circle. But there's no telling when the demon will ask for it back. In a past life, that man turned his back on him and took the circle. After drinking coffee, the man said to wait to see him. The Lord told him he was such an incredible man that he couldn't even imagine it. He would surely find an excellent use for the boy. Putting his hand to his heart, Tiny bowed, thanking him for the valuable opportunity. After breakfast, the boy headed to practice. He thought about that mysterious man and the organization that was bothering him. But there was no point in thinking about them now. He had to stick to his plan. Analyzing what he saw, the boy concluded, the Lord is a second-round fighter. Crayon is a second-stage fighter. Crayon is a bit stronger, but they are similar in level, as far as it can be determined by comparing a mage and a mana user. It was to reach the second level that Tiny had spent much time in his previous life, but it would be easier now. He would definitely get it. Practicing hard, the boy calculated that 6 days would be enough for him. 3 days later, after going out for training, the boy felt that his body was still small, but he had become much stronger. Along with his weight and strength, his flexibility has increased. He moves better than he did in his previous life. Working through the basics again, the boy discovered that being a thug was problematic. In his past life, he had wanted to be big and strong. The manatello, which was connected to the subconscious mind, reacted to this by disturbing the harmony with his overpumped body. Now he realized that there was no need to become so huge. It has no effect on strength. 2 knights came to the training ground. One of them said, looking at Tiny, that he was the monster who had kicked Sir Grant in the leg. And the men hurriedly retreated, saying they would come another time. The satisfied boy followed, thanking those leaving that they had oriented themselves, so he wouldn't have to explain where they belonged. The boy continued to eat hard and go to training, so after 3 days, everyone lost interest in him. But one day, 3 knights appeared on the set. One of them was Cran. The man said he knew he'd find the kid here. The boy asked the commander what was wrong. He said to follow him, and the Lord ordered him to arm him. Our hero walked smiling. He thought he was just in time to receive the weapon. They approached the warehouse's door. Cran said, as the boy understood that the Lord held him in high esteem. Entering the vault, the guard said the kid should be grateful. The boy looked around. The armor looked expensive, but it wouldn't fit him now. There was nothing like a mace or a battle axe among the weapons. Sighing, Tiny thought that there was no hope of additional income. Then the boy asked if he could have a sword like Cran's. The guard took hold of the blade, asking if it looked like a broadsword. Taking the sword out of its sheath and stroking it gently, the man said that this artifact was called Sorrow. It was made by Roger, a famous blacksmith, and a guy shouldn't look at things beyond his level. Tiny wondered how much blood and sweat went into making such a sword. He said out loud, if it's the level. He'd be better suited for it. The man was shocked. With a smirk, the boy said that a good weapon was something a talented warrior should have, for the sake of the Lord's well-being, among other things. The man boiled with rage and shouted that the boy was pouncing. Tiny suggested a fight to see who was stronger. The boy suggested that Cran could take his head off if he lost. The guards standing under the door heard shouting and noise from the warehouse. As they listened, they heard the boy apologize to the commander and say he would behave better from now on. Suddenly, the warehouse door opened. A slightly battered boy stepped out, carrying a sword wrapped in cloth. Looking at the boy, one guard said pitifully that Sir Cran had mistreated the child. The other said that a man was in trouble when he was small yet talented. The rumors were true. The maid joined the conversation, asking what the rumors were. The guard said that the commander didn't trust this boy. No wonder he was so concerned about him, for rumor had it that this child would be the next commander. Sensing our hero, the maid said that the commander shouldn't have done that. The boy is still very young. The guard replied that the commander had lost his mind. Whatever it was, the guards decided to behave carefully and not to get on the commander's nerves. When the maids met the boy in the hallway, they took pity on him and asked who had beaten him so severely. Tiny said the commander promised to give him a gun, so the kid went after him, and that's how it turned out. The kind-hearted girls sent the boy to rest. They asked him to let them know if he needed anything. Tiny thanked them. Meanwhile, in his study, Lord Timon von Phil was drinking wine. The Lord asked his servant about the victims. The butler replied that they were at his disposal. Von Phyllis asked if they were bodies from the wolf gang again. The servant confirmed. The Lord thought for a moment. This boy had turned the life of the invaders upside down. The Lord let the servant go. It was as if he were talking to himself. He could not understand, but he would ignore such trivialities for now. Once his bloodline was confirmed in a couple of days, the Lord would be on a path to success. Von Phyllis had one thing on his mind. If it turned out that the boy was from the wrong family, not only he but also the Lord, the leader of the wolves, would have to pay a terrible price for it. But the Lord reassured himself that this would not happen. His behavior and knowledge showed that he was from a respectable family. You can't defeat a knight just by being talented at such a young age. It's only possible if he's learned the secret technique of that family. More importantly, he has dark eyes and hair. After convincing himself he was right, the Lord finished his wine and went to bed. Comfortably seated, the Lord said he was looking forward to meeting that man. Already dozing off, the man began to hear the chimes of warning magic. Sitting on the bed and struggling to open his eyes, the Lord grumbled that it was a noisy servant. Snapping his fingers, the man easily said he would sacrifice him. But finally opening his groggy eyes, the Lord saw a boy with a sword before him. Stabbing the blade into the Lord's chest, Tiny pronounced that this was his punishment from heaven. The morning filled the castle with frenzied screaming. The maid entered the gentleman's room and saw a terrible picture. Captain Ram, who had arrived, exclaimed that it was a dark mage. It couldn't be. The knights gathered around the Lord's bedside and discussed the fact that a priest had stopped by. The priest would report to the parish that he had noticed demonic energy. Knight of the Order of Filsgrand noted that the Imperial Investigation Department would travel here soon. The other knights were discussing amongst themselves why the body was in such a state, as if he had been dead for a couple of weeks. It was rumored that the dark mage had caused the remains to rot as soon as the Lord died. Only Gren stood and silently wondered why the Lord had traded his lineage and honor as an aristocrat of the Empire to be destroyed but not exposed. The knight bowed his head mournfully and said, "You can't learn anything from a dead man. There was only one problem. The sword sticking out of the body is very similar to the one wielded by the commander." The nearby knights couldn't believe that Cran was involved in this case. One of the men remembered that the able-bodied boy had met the Lord in person. He said there was a discussion that he might be the next commander. I'm sure Kron must have freaked out when he heard that. Gren dismissed the suggestion, saying there was no way the commander would go crazy over these rumors. But if they did, no one knew where the commander was now. Gren concluded that it was impossible to leave things as they were. It was decided to do a little investigating. After collecting witness statements, the man found that all the house employees had seen Tiny the previous day. He'd been beaten up by his commanding officer. Walking into the knight's room, Gren announced everything pointed to one man. He motioned for the boy to be called to him. The beaten kid said that yesterday he went after the commander because he offered him a choice of weapons. With his head down, the boy went on to say that he had not expected a sudden beating. Of course, he was never given a weapon. A furious Gren shouted, pounding his fist on the table, that they had already inspected the vault. They found signs that the captain had been there, but had already left. The man continued that no one on the estate had seen him. Kron had vanished after his encounter with the boy. Looking into the eyes of the sad boy, the knight asked him if he had ever seen him again. He answered that he had not. The knight asked if the boy had noticed anything strange in the captain's behavior. The boy said the commander was dissatisfied with the Lord's hiring decision, but they never met after that. Gren compared. The boy's words matched the servant's testimony. Tiny wondered what would happen to him. The Lord promised to secure his future. The man let the boy go, asking him to return here tomorrow morning. As he walked out the door, the boy thought that since Gren was the local knight, he must be nasty. But for some reason, he couldn't remember his face. Our hero recalled a scene from his past life when he defeated the Lord's guards. Gren wasn't there. As he walked away from the interrogation site, the boy thought it strange that he had called him, since Tiny had already testified. He noted that he must not let his guard down. The next morning, Gren handed the boy a mercenary badge and money. The boy was very surprised. The man explained that a commoner needed to be either a mercenary or a merchant to move freely. He would get recommendations. The boy thought he wanted to make one for himself, and he asked the knight why he had given him all this. The knight replied that you will waste your talent if you wallow in troubled waters. Go to sea. This is advice from a man who has gained experience in life. The boy looked at Gren and thought he might want to tell himself the same thing. The man laughed and asked not to be thanked too much, and Tiny thought that if he had left this place, Why he didn't remember him was understandable. Our hero smiled back and thanked me. He said he was thinking of leaving here himself. Tiny plunged into his own thoughts. Since the Dark Mage had appeared, the Imperial family would take up the cause. With his action, the boy had stopped the movement of that man. Twirling the Valentia family ring in his hands, the boy thought that the investigation squad from the duchy would probably not come. One must go there oneself. Gren continued to cheer the boy on in his decision to leave and asked him to remember him once he'd made progress. The boy asked the knight's name. The man exclaimed in surprise that he didn't know his name. The knight stood up and introduced himself. He is Gren Riverty. You can just call him Gren. The boy replied that a man should remember his name too. As he left the manor, our hero turned around and said to himself that with the Lord and Commander not around, Gren would have a hard time. And Tiny felt a little ashamed of him. The boy remembered that as he left the office, the knight reasoned that they needed mages who specialized in tracking trails to get to the commander. Tiny grinned, and he walked away, leaving the problem unsolved, but there was nothing to be done. Adjusting the mercenary badge in his pocket, the kid decided he could rent a horse from the guild. Then the spirit of a wolf materialized in front of the boy. The animal wanted his master to ride him. Tiny said that the road was long and arduous even for him. I remembered from my past life of such riders when people turned inside out after 10 minutes of such a ride. The boy replied to the animal that only orcs with their sense of balance thrown off were capable of such things. The wolf continued to insist. The boy gave in, climbing on the animal's back. As he sat back down, the boy noted that the wolf was smaller in physical form. Spirits take the largest form, but their size depends on the summoner's level in the physical body. Taking in the scruff of his neck, the boy felt a surge of energy. He realized that they needed to synchronize their souls and sensations first. The boy and the wolf closed their eyes. Tiny mentally said, second-level spirit summoner, soul bond. The kid felt the wolf's body grow muscular. Tiny remembered his conversations with Estina again. Depending on the level, she had told him what else a summoner could do to become stronger. But its characteristics are bound to reflect on the physicality of the spirit. The kid realized that the wolf had gotten stronger and stronger. That's how his characteristics affect him. The animal sprang from its seat. Our hero almost fell, barely holding on by the scruff of his neck. The boy felt all his senses sharpen after the merging of souls. Moonwalker's movement, sniffing, and eyesight will help shorten the travel time to Invender. They'll be able to travel long distances faster than before, and they might even make it to Karen, where the first mishap happened. In the continent's past life, numerous misfortunes happened one after another. It was as if they heralded the arrival of the Demon King's army. This has incredibly drained the strength of mankind. The boy recalled that it all started with the disappearance of the divine object in Karuna. He must prevent it from happening first. The 7 jewels of humanity, which the goddess had bestowed upon humans, are the 7 great divine objects. They should have been the last stronghold, but they were stolen in a past life. Tiny pondered that he would grow up stronger and prevent misfortunes, and fight the Demon King with other men who would be fully prepared for battle. The first disaster in the kingdom is by the sea, Karuna. He will go there when he drops by the Duke's estate. Many people stood in the square, discussing the latest news that the Lord had been destroyed. The Imperial family had sent a squad to investigate. Rumors circulated that a dark magician was behind it. The bandits who remained in the city discussed whether all that was going on would affect them. They decided to lie low for a while. At night, someone in a black hood appeared at the estate gates. The guards didn't want to let the stranger through, asking who he was. The man telling them to mind their own business snapped his fingers and scattered the guards around. Gren was awake at this time. He kept thinking about the problems that had come over him. When he saw the strange stranger, he drew his sword and shouted who he was. The unknown man said he had a question, and he ordered him to tell all about the Lord's death. Then he snapped his fingers. A stream of black energy entered the knight's head. He began to tell everything he knew, as if mesmerized. The stranger asked where the Lord's body was. The man said it had been placed in a coffin and left in the chambers, as the Imperial Family Investigation Squad ordered. The strange noise commanded the man to sleep, and he didn't wake up until an hour later. Gren woke up sitting against a pillar. He wondered if he had dozed off like that. I had a headache. The man decided, apparently, he'd been working hard lately. A guard ran into the room. He shouted that they were in big trouble. The Lord's body was gone. Gren panicked. It was significant evidence of the Dark Wizard's interference. Meanwhile, in the woods behind Felix's estate, a stranger was trying to figure out what had happened. As he touched the sword, he felt that Kron, the owner of the sword, was no longer alive when he was thrown to the wolves. The dark man realized it was all the scum's fault for getting rid of the wolf. After what had happened, the hooded man was sure that the dark-haired boy had disappeared immediately. The man promised that Tiny would pay for disrupting the organization's plans. Meanwhile, Tiny and the rest of the people chatting about their problems passed through the gates of Lucentia's western castle. He walked on, looking around. He thought Lucentia had a lot of visitors. Things are quiet in the city right now, but that could change if that man acts first. The boy sighed, saying it was time to get some gear. Shaking out the 2 coins Gren had lent him from his pouch, the boy thanked him for the gesture of goodwill, but it was very little. Then our hero heard voices calling him and noticed that there was money. 2 armed men appeared in front of him. They started demanding that the kid give up his coins while asking nicely. To the bandit's surprise, Tiny asked about them. Smiling evilly and kneading his fists, the boy asked his opponents if they had any money. Our hero remembered one rule from his past life in the underground. If you are surrounded by a huge shadow, you have to hold your breath. He remembered how the priest had called him and told him that if he killed many people, his soul would be corrupted. The man claimed that the day would come when he would feel guilty, asked for mercy. Tiny replied then that everything would be all right. He never killed people, but he had destroyed many criminals. And now, having fought street thugs, he's shaken down a bag of money. The people who saw it were amazed. The Rufus family, considered the strongest, lost. The boy was surprised they were considered as strong as knights. I wouldn't say so, but it's not up to par. The opponents are getting up from the ground, swearing. Rising up, the bandits again wanted to attack the boy. But the boy gave them a good fight back. All the attackers were on the ground in a moment. Tiny approached one of them and took the bag of money. The man threatened that his boss wouldn't let him get away with it. When he shook the coins out of the bag, the boy was happy to see that it was full of money. He said he would find a good use for it. Our hero went to buy himself an outfit. He was offered armor made of an iron bull from the southern mountains. The shopkeeper told me that the armor would repel most arrows. The boy was picking out a mace. When he picked one up, he said it was pretty good. Tiny heard the guys talking as they tried on their weapons. They were discussing how they couldn't get close. They could watch from a distance. And they heard that the girl was beautiful. He asked the shopkeeper about the event. The man said that young Lady Valentia would be making her rounds. The boy remembered their last meeting. Irina was the first to show him what love was. Chloe was the first to show him hope. Thinking back to Irina, the boy said that even though it had ended badly, he was able to get out of Invender. Thinking of both girls, the lad said that if Mistress knew how he lived, she would consider that he adhered to his sister's wishes. However, many years later, when she met him in a past life, the girl didn't remember him. She said she was really sorry. The boy rushed down the city street. He thought they would meet much sooner this time, and she would definitely remember him. He should ask her to help him see the Sword Emperor. Leading the lady through the city streets, the representative of the local aristocracy, the eldest son of Count Lucentia, Edmund von Lucent, told her that Lucentia was one of the largest cities in the central region. It specializes in... The girl interrupted him, replying that she was clear. The guy continued to tell about the economic development of the city. But the lady interrupted such a tour. She asked him to take her to the city slums. The guy didn't understand why she wanted to go there. The girl explained that the people in those areas were also subjects of the emperor. The younger earl laughed and motioned for the footsteps to follow him. Chloe did not understand why Edmund von Lucent reacted like that. He is the heir and has received a proper education, so he should know the disciplines of the empire. The girl remembered her father's words, who had explained that she should keep an eye on the people at the bottom. It was only when their lives were better that things would get better in their lands and country. Her father is strange because he adheres to the values they were taught. If she could, she would like to change people's perceptions of the slums. But a groom was announced at her coming-of-age ceremony, so it will soon be impossible for her to lead her usual life. Chloe wondered if she should go to the temple. They had been calling the girl to them for a long time. But her father would probably be upset about it. He wouldn't want her to spend the rest of her life alone. At that moment, Tiny ran up to the procession. The guards stood in a protective posture. Chloe wondered where the little boy had come from. The younger earl asked what was wrong with him and where he was from. The boy took the ring out of his pocket and said that the mistress had given it to him personally. The boy got down on one knee and said the girl had asked him to look for her. The boy was late but asked permission to show her his respect. The lady's guard asked what the hell he was talking about. Chloe recognized and confirmed that it was indeed her ring. Taking it in her hands, the girl pronounced that she had given it to a child from the slums. Turning to Tiny, she pontificated how he, the young lord, had gotten it. The guards held their swords to the boy. They demanded answers from him. Tiny realized that they had met too soon. He tried to explain that he was the kid. The mistress was perplexed. The boy realized that he must have grown up too fast, which is why Chloe didn't recognize him. He said he was the only one in Fields with dark hair, if not the whole duchy. The girl didn't understand how this was possible. The boy was much smaller, dirtier, and spoke with difficulty. Chloe added that the body was skinny. He looked pathetic but cute. The boy smiled, remembering that she always liked small but cute things. In that case, the boy went tricky and handed the girl a little wolf cub. She squeezed the puppy, saying, "What is such a cute little thing doing here?" The guard tried to explain to the mistress that it was a spirit they knew nothing about. Chloe replied that she had heard that spirits only got along with those with pure souls. The guard squinted in Tiny's direction. She couldn't believe the boy had a weapon and a spirit to fight with. The mistress asked what the spirit's name was. The boy answered that it was Moonwolf, which in the Western language would be Moonwolf. The guard thought suspiciously that he knew the Western language as well. Mistress smiled and said she hadn't expected such a change in the boy in just a few months. He couldn't have been 10 years old then. She remembered that his name was translated as Little One. He answered that he was Tiny. He is 13 years old and started growing fast after he awakened his mana. Chloe agreed that was the name. The protector stepped between the mistress and the boy. She screamed that he had half-human blood in him. "What is he?" Claimed he was highly suspicious. Chloe called out to Vivian's guard, but she didn't stop. She apologized and said that it was her duty to protect her mistress. Count Edmund von Lucent intervened in the conversation, saying that he, too, thought the boy was suspicious. He suggested that he should lock him up and have him investigated. The girl objected. The boy said he didn't expect everyone to trust him, but when Miss Chloe gave him the ring, she said she would help him. The girl readily agreed and inquired now that he needed help. The young earl was furious that his words were ignored. Our hero asked to arrange a meeting with Duke Esgard von Valentius. Vivian again insulted the boy, saying, "How dare he? He must be out of his mind." Tiny asked if she really thought the boy could hurt him. Duke is one of the continent's superhumans. He uses aura. The boy asked, "They are talking about the Sword Emperor, aren't they?" Vivian hovered a little at what she heard. Chloe laughed. He said it was also embarrassing for his father to hear this title, Sword Emperor. Not too long ago, he had become one of the 7 knights of the continent. Our hero tensed a little. This is, after all, not yet such a well-known fact. Vivian replied that the title suits the Duke perfectly. He's a great man. Even the news of his successes has reached the hinterlands. Tiny exhaled. Fortunately, the people around him didn't take his awareness lightly. The boy explained that he wanted to tell the Duke about what had happened recently in Fiel, since he was personally present there. Left alone with Vivian, Chloe asked if it had really happened. The guard confirmed it. The disgruntled mistress looked at the guard and asked what else she was hiding from her. Maybe Tiny hadn't told her everything, Vivian answered, afraid that the mistress would get involved in dangerous matters. The girl confirmed that she knew nothing else. Just like the boy said, one of the lords of the empire turned out to be a dark mage. But it seems he was destroyed by someone else. Chloe said Tiny's testimony was necessary because the boy was there in person. Exhaling, the Duchess said, "Well, the boy himself wanted to talk to his father." She then informed the guard that they would go to the main manor immediately. Vivian looked squeamishly at the puppy in Mistress's lap and wondered how long she would carry that spirit with her. She warned the girl that he could hurt her. In response, Chloe raised the wolf in her arms and said it was a little cutie. Vivian, too, succumbed for a moment to the charms of the furry lump and called him cute, but then quickly came to her senses, concentrating on not letting her guard down. Chloe asked where Tiny was. The guard said Mr. Edmund announced that he had business with the boy and led him away. Chloe barely had time to ask what the matter was before the spirit in her hands disappeared with a sharp pop. Calling the boy outside, the Count said they could finally have an everyday conversation. He asked the boy's name again. He answered Tiny. Edmund began to resent the boy's familiarity with him. Our hero sharply replied that it would be put down and interrogated the boy, who said he knew something about dark magicians. The young aristocrat smirked, saying that he didn't know anything. He said this because the kid was acting arrogant. Our hero interjected, meaning it was a lie. The haughty guy shouted that the boy was continuing to sass him and swung around to slap him. Our hero intercepted the Count's hand. He couldn't believe the commoner had stopped him, asked what was wrong with him. Edmund tried with all his might to break free, but he couldn't get free of his grip. The boy shouted that if the boy disrespected him one more time, he would make Miss Chloe take responsibility for it. How dare the boy harm an aristocrat? Tiny let go of his hand. He scratched the back of his head and said that an aristocrat was a bizarre title. He added that he could do as he pleased. The boy then jokingly wagged his finger at the boy, telling him to show what he had prepared. After all, something maintains the Count's confidence while talking to him. The fire of anger flared up in the young lord. He called the boy after him, calling him an insolent commoner. Vivian was already rushing on horseback for the boy at her mistress's orders. He was going as fast as he could. The guard thought the mistress was overprotecting him, but if the spirit has disappeared, then its master is very far away from it. She asked the guard at the gate. He pointed outside the castle. Vivian didn't understand how Edmund could have taken him away. The girl drove her horse as hard as she could. She was afraid of being late. Meanwhile, the young earl led the boy to a tall building on the county's outskirts. A man came to the meeting, greeted the gentleman, and said there was still time before tax collection day. The man led the guests inside and asked if the Count had come for the goods. In the building, the boy saw Rufus, the eldest of the family, and his subordinates. The boy exhaled. For him, what was happening was expected. The young gentleman said he doesn't care about the goods. He wants to teach this ignorant commoner a lesson. The head of the household interjected, telling the child to teach. Edmund punched the man in the face, shouting that he had asked to be taught a lesson, not to argue with him. The bewildered man replied this time that he understood the gentleman. Rufus called Eric, the second most important in the gang, and Tillman, the third most important. He asked them to take care of the kid. They were acquaintances of his who had met a visitor to the city on the street. Seeing Tiny, the boys were shocked. The boy smiled and waved at them, saying hello again. Rufus got angry. He yelled at Eric and Tillman what they were waiting for. The guys fell to their knees in front of the man in charge. They started screaming that it was the one they'd been telling about, asking him to avenge them. The gang leader took up the mace himself. He told the boy that today was not his day and that he shouldn't have crossed the line. Edmund cheered like a child, thinking that now the haughty smile would be wiped off the boy's face. As the man swung around, the boy outran him and knocked him down with his mace. Rufus collapsed to the floor with a tremendous clatter. The adversaries were very surprised at what was happening, and the boy, twirling the mace in his hands, asked the young earl if that was all. Edmund rushed to Rufus, asking him to protect him. The man sat on the floor and came to his senses. Tiny's eyes burned with anger. He followed the boy and said, "Let a bandit try to protect the earl." Seeing the helpless men, our hero asked what Rufus was like, but not for long. Turning to the others, he asked what these guys would do. Just then, the door swung open noisily. Vivian ran into the building and called out for the boy. The girl was very surprised at what she saw. The boy was sitting on a safe that the bandits had carried, some of which was lying on the floor of the room. Tiny sat studying the local gang's record book. When the safe was put on the floor, the boy jumped off it. He asked Vivian why she had come. The girl explained that the mistress had ordered it because she was worried about him and asked what had happened. The boy handed the guard a book with a list of bribes. She was shocked. The boy explained that the bandits were engaged in human trafficking and the laws of the empire did not scare them at all. Tiny said such proof was so strong that even an aristocrat like Edmund couldn't beat it. A bewildered Vivian only asked what he'd been doing all this time. The next day, Edmund was banished from the Earl's household for such a transgression. The procession, with the lady's carriage and the new acquaintance, set off in the direction of the county of Valentia. Sitting in the carriage, Chloe talked to her friends about the young Count. It seemed that he had been in the human trafficking business for quite a long time. The Count had become completely disillusioned with him. The girl assumed that now, the relationship between their families would become much more tense. Vivian lowered her head and apologized. Chloe asked if it was the girl's fault. Tiny cut into the conversation, saying no, of course not. The guard pulled him back. The mistress laughed. Vivian couldn't understand what was happening. Raising her index finger, Chloe said that the holder's status should not influence the attitude toward merit and crime. Did you forget? The guard still did not understand what was going on. She wondered why her mistress was looking at her like that then. Chloe answered that the girl should have broken something for Edmund so that he couldn't escape and hide from punishment. The guard exhaled, so that's what the mistress was thinking. Only Tiny realized what was starting to happen at this point. They, the famous young daughter of a sword emperor and a talented female knight, will team up. At times, they will be like sisters to each other, and at different times, they will be like mothers and daughters. They have a special relationship. Vivian will remain at Chloe's side even if her family situation changes. The boy sat back and smiled, thinking she liked being Chloe's big sister or mother. The young mistress interrupted his musings, asking what Tiny was thinking about. Looking out the window, the boy said Edmund was proud of his title. Now that the name alone was not enough to absolve him of his sins and his family was after him, he had the most fitting punishment. Vivian even jumped up. She screamed, "Can a child think like that?" Squeezing the wolf cub, Chloe said his master was thinking right. The mistress named the puppy Moon. She said it was easier to pronounce. Just Loon sounds good too. The boy dared to ask quietly, and they no longer suspected him. Chloe said that she had heard Phil's stories about the dark-haired boy. They say he destroyed the underground organization and freed all its victims. The girl winked at him, saying that he'd done well today too. That kind of thing is impressive. Tiny smiled. He was glad that Chloe believed him, but the girl threatened him that from now on he would report such things to her in advance. The boy laughed and said, "That's right, miss." 3 days later, driving through the forest, the carriage suddenly stopped. Chloe asked what was wrong. One of the guards replied that an elven woman was asking for a ride. Chloe and her traveling companions exited the carriage to see who it was. The elfess took off her hood and introduced herself. It was the World Tree Elf. Her name was Arena. She greeted the owners of the carriage and asked if they wouldn't mind giving her a little ride. The mistress and the guard were surprised and regarded the traveling companion. But Tiny realized that the guest was not who she claimed to be. She was a dark mage of the fifth circle. Elves are descendants of fairies, renowned for their beauty. Elfheim is a kingdom of elves located in the far west. They are extremely rare in the Middle Eastern kingdom of Aslan. Most of the inhabitants treat them with kindness. Elves are naturally born spirit summoners, known for their purity, kindness, and peacefulness. Looking at the elven girl, the boy pondered, who would have thought that such a pure creature could turn out to be a dark mage of the fifth circle. A delighted Chloe wondered where the girl was headed, north to the Beastman kingdom via the Duchy of Valentino. The stranger asked if she thought the kingdom was a lovely place. It had long been at odds with Aslan, after all. The lady clarified that that is not the point. It was just that it was very far away. The elf explained that she was going there for training. Her goal was to explore the world and collect stories of different places. Chloe guessed what the interlocutor was talking about, the training of 11 knights, the elite among elves. The elfess replied that she was. The mistress is well aware. Pointing to the wolf cub in Chloe's hands, the elfess asked if it was her spirit. The girl was surprised that her companion realized it was a spirit. She told him that the boy was the real owner of the wolf cub. Looking carefully at Tiny, the guest said there were almost no summoners among humans. Only Tiny realized she knew before she came here. That man was a big shot. Since that was the case, the boy realized he couldn't rush into battle. Depicting childlike directness, the boy began to approach the guest with the words that he had never seen elves before. Vivian grabbed the kid. Chloe grumbled about what he was doing, and the boy thought that as long as he didn't coordinate his actions. Fortunately, the guest does not know Moonwolf's abilities. Only the one who contracted him knows. The seemingly friendly girl said that their meeting was momentous, asked if he wanted her to show some magic. The boy wondered how she managed to hide so much demonic energy. The girl lit a fire in the palm of her hand. The boy thought she could even release mana. In a past life, he had learned to tell them apart. Otherwise, there would have been 10 times as many casualties. I should have listened to Argon then. The boy estimated the strength. There were 12 stage 3 experts with them. 1 stage 4 swordswoman. They say mages' circles are the same as mana users' stages. It will take 5 people to overpower someone who excels by a level. So Tiny, with his 2nd stage, would take 100 of his kind to overpower a level 5 mage. He'll die without a chance if he gets into an open fight. That's why he needs to attack at a surprise, opportune moment. He's got a trump card up his sleeve. The puppy jumped from Chloe to Vivian. The mistress was upset, saying she must have tickled him too much. The guard asked if she could hold it now. The elfess laughed too. She said it was a cute spirit and would like to hold it in her arms too. The boy took the wolf cub in his arms and handed it to the girl, telling her he could take it. The elfess held out her hands and said she would not refuse. She called for the baby to come to her. In a second, everyone around him was in shock. The giant wolf rushed to attack the mage. Tiny went on the attack with his mace. Vivian backed up the guy's attack and worked her sword perfectly. The knights were shocked. It's demonic energy. The dark mage yelled curses at the boy, asking when they realized. Chloe looked at the mage and thought she had done the right thing when she trusted Tiny. With the help of the wolf cub, Tiny informed the girls that it was a high-level elf mage. Vivian should attack her. The lady replied that it could lead to conflict between the races. He understands the girl's position. The boy explained that she was supporting Lord Phil's. If they didn't attack suddenly, they would be in trouble themselves. Chloe replied that she would take responsibility and give her life if necessary. When Vivian took the wolf cub in her arms, it whispered all the information into her ear. The elfess pushed Vivian's sword away and lashed out, leaping into the air. Vivian and Tiny were angry. They didn't hit the heart. The dark mage managed to shield herself with an energy shield. Vivian commanded that everyone go into the attack together. With shouts of, "That's right!" all the guards rushed at the dark mage. Vivian continued to command the guards to prepare for battle and protect the lady. Tiny rushed to attack with his mace. The elven woman repelled him. The boy hadn't expected this. He flew away from the protective dome, springing back. The elfess used her dark energy and fought off the entire Empress's race. The witch was furious. She kept saying how they could have guessed. Our hero, with a smirk on his face, said it wasn't hard. She reeks of nasty power. The dark mage screamed at the kid that it was all his. And from her rage, the dark energy flow grew stronger and stronger. She gathered all her power and directed the entire stream at Tiny. The boy applied the iron armor iron body technique. Our hero was thrown to the ground but remained unharmed. It was the first time he'd ever used these skills. Barely made it. At that moment, Vivian commanded, while the elven shield was weakened, for all the guards to attack. The dark mage, who was several levels higher, fought off the Radi. The boy saddled the wolf and rushed to the aid of the warriors. Tiny managed to break through the defense barrier with her mace. The witch screamed that what was happening was one person's fault, but she would destroy everyone. Vivian and Tiny replied in vain hope and threw themselves into the fray. Despite all the attacks, the dark mage's protective dome could not be destroyed. The boy shouted that they still couldn't hurt her. The witch shouted, accepting defeat. And again, she attacked all the guards who couldn't get near her in any way. At one moment, one of the charges of magical energy almost hit Chloe. Vivian barely had time to deflect it. After repelling the attack, everyone saw the witch's energy fire disappear. It was Tiny who was able to block the fire completely. Thanks to the alteration technique, the Iron Divine armor was now better than in his previous life. Vivian and Tiny attacked once again. The boy thought he'd try to take the witch's defenses apart. They finally succeeded. The dark mage's shield collapsed with a tremendous explosion. The wounded elf found herself on the ground. She clenched her teeth in anger and pain. Our hero jumped on his wolf's back and rushed into the final attack, thinking he had made it. On the other side, Vivian advanced on the elven woman. She also thought it was necessary to attack one more time to finish off the enemy. The dark mage gathered the last of her strength into a fist, and with a cry of, "How dare the despicable humans attack her?" once again fought back. The guard was amazed that the witch still had so much strength after so many attacks. Tiny came out to fight the dark forces. He and his wolf gave off a strong stream of energy, which reflected the witch's energy. The kid thought it was just a bit longer, and then the Bulova kicked in. Vivian in turn sent the guards on the attack, ordering them to finish off the enemy. Another large explosion, and everyone realized that the Elfes had escaped. The elves soared above the forest and watched as the people in the clearing shouted, "The enemy is fleeing! We need to catch her!" Realizing she couldn't get far, the witch turned to the demon for help. Tiny knew that this technique was the last resort of demon followers. They sacrificed themselves to increase their mana. Turning to the fire sacrifice technique, the Elfes shouted, "Let everything here burn to the ground." The knights were at their limit, fending off attacks from the dark forces. The boy realized they needed the power to finish the Elfes. The kid told Chloe they'd bought enough time. Now it was her turn. The young mistress harnessed the energy of her kind. With a cry of, "Let there be light," the girl released a stream of divine energy from her hands. It was a power bestowed with alternate peace and blessing. From that moment, a person who has repented and been baptized begins to possess anti-demonic power. But some have power from birth. People become messengers of God, saints, or heroes. In the rarest and most ossified case, those who did not become priests are priests. Chloe's divine energy spilled around, destroying the mage's dark energy. The knights were shocked by what was happening and didn't understand how Miss Chloe had done all this. The boy realized that the girl was hiding her own power, even from her knight guards. The all-powerful Sword Emperor feared his daughter might be taken to the church. Pargnishka noted that he had never seen a priest stronger than his mistress. He thought she must be weaker at this point. But her strength was enough to destroy the elf. The witch sat on the ground, saying it was impossible. She couldn't lose to lowlifes like them. At this moment, Tiny attacked the elfess once more with his mace. Boychik explained that everyone around him was in shock, so he had to finish off the enemy. Chloe ran towards the kid, yelling that she didn't need to. It was worth questioning the elf girl. Our hero was a little confused. He didn't think about it beforehand. The lady explained that even though she was a priestess, she couldn't sense the demonic energy. She wanted to know why the Elfian had done that. Looking at the girl's body, Chloe suggested that her divine power could heal her. Tiny clarified that it would only finally assure her death. Taking a deep breath, Mistress said that there was no choice. The boy stood there thinking they had managed to destroy a high-level mage. A couple of seconds after the battle ended, the knights from the Gosapoji Ochre began to discuss the fact that Miss was actually a priest. This was unbelievable news to everyone. The girl was a little upset that her secret was out. What for? Glancing at Tiny, Chloe asked he knew, didn't he? The boy didn't understand the question. The girl explained that he was the only one not surprised by her power. The boy answered that he knew. Chloe did not understand how. Not even all her relatives knew this secret. The kid said he couldn't say yet, but someday she'll know his secret. Chloe smiled sweetly and agreed. The boy was surprised that the girl would give up so easily. Scratching his head, our hero said he would take responsibility for what happened to the Dark Mage. Tiny said that he had gotten everyone in big trouble. Chloe replied with a smile, like the kind of trouble that would follow Edmund. The boy scratched the back of his head, not sure what the mistress was talking about. Didn't she think his actions had put everyone in jeopardy? Chloe was a little angry at this interpretation of what had happened. She explained that it was the aristocrat's duty to fight demons, and if she died, it would be because of her weakness. She had no reason to blame the boy. Our hero noted to himself that the mistress was the same as before, and the girl ruffled his hair and said with a smile that he was worried for nothing. That's so sweet. Vivian, watching from the sidelines, chuckled and asked if he didn't like being called cute. The boy confirmed, thinking to himself that he was an adult, so why would he like it? The guard added that he was really just a baby. Our hero was surprised at what he heard. The girl who started to squeeze his cheeks explained that kids his age don't like to be called cute. Turns out the boy has a human side too. The boy tried to pull out Vivian's arms, saying he shouldn't be embarrassed. Chloe thoughtfully said that she should report to her father as soon as possible. And she added emphatically that she needed to send him a message from the nearest town. After a while, our friends entered Tyvan's main gate. Following his mistress, the boy thought he knew that the Emperor of the Sword had no soul in his daughter, but stepping over the threshold, Chloe covered her eyes with her hands and said, "Well, why did her father do that?" People around me were surprised. They said that the rumors were true. The young empress was greeted by an order of blue-winged knights. The boy felt that the guardsmen were powerful and worthy of being called the elite of the Duchy of Valentino. Everyone in the entire group is at least the rank of an expert. There is no one stronger in the empire. The commander of the knights took off his helmet and introduced himself. Vice captain of the Order of the Blue Wing, Garen Clayman. All 103 of his comrades were with him. He commanded everyone to show respect to Mistress Chloe. All the knights got down on one knee. Chloe thanked Sir Garen and the rest of the knights for coming, and asked everyone to stand up. Upon rising, speed god Garen Clayman put his right hand to his heart and said he was glad to see her well. The Lord was greatly worried about his daughter. Miss Chloe was a little displeased. She wrote back and texted her father that she was fine. There was no reason for the blonde guard to meet her. The boy explained that the lady had been attacked by a dark magician. If the knights had not been ready to go immediately, the Lord would have personally come instead of them. The girl asked in surprise, wondering which way to go. Knight reported that the family jewel, Tempest, suddenly disappeared about a month ago. Chloe and her friends were shocked by what they heard. She didn't understand. Her father had always worn it. Garen confirmed that it was the problem. When the Duke woke up in the morning, the jewelry was gone. Tiny was struck by lightning. Tempest? The boy asked Chloe if it was an artifact by any chance. The girl answered that it was probably. To the boy's surprise, Chloe explained that only priests know this secret, so she could only assume that it was a powerful artifact. The boy answered that he was clear and was very upset. The girl didn't understand what was wrong with him. Tiny replied that he seemed to know why he was missing. Everyone around me was surprised. They started asking him what he knew and where he came from. The kid asked to see the Duke, said he'd explain everything to him. Chloe's carriage continued onward, escorted by the Order of the Blue Wing. Walking at the head, Clayman kept thinking, wow, the boy knows why. Garen asked a nearby knight who the child was. The guard said he was talking about Tiny. The commander noted to himself that he had heard that name before. The knight told him that Malik was incredible. His contribution to the victory over the Dark Mage is very significant. From what he'd heard, the knight added that the kid would soon be an expert. Clayman was surprised at his age. The commander noted that even the 7 great knights in his year weren't that talented. Garen walked and thought the boy was a genius. No, he was a monster. The captain must bring him to his family. And then the man remembered. Tiny is the one who sent the letters from Fields. His name is very rare, so Clayman is sure it's him. Chloe, looking out the carriage window, even jumped with joy. Their path took them through a whole field of lilies. Tiny inquired if the girl liked lilies. The happy girl replied that, of course, they liked them. Her deceased mother and father loved them too. They even called her that as a child. Tiny smiled and said that name would suit her. Vivian said that the love story of the Duke and his wife is very famous. She was the only woman he loved. Had the boy heard of it? The boy said he thought he had. At this moment, Tiny remembered the Emperor's words from his past life, that he didn't like this flower much. It was the most critical part of the secret he had asked him not to forget. Our hero grinned. No wonder the Sword Emperor kept it a secret. The kid suggested that the Emperor probably didn't remember his past life. But since the Imperator had asked to seek him out as soon as possible, the boy was sure there was a way to make him stronger. Looking at his hands, our hero thought that he owed it to himself to meet the Emperor and start training. He would find a way to become an Aura Master, and his main goal was to gain more power. Without Aura, Tiny can't get a Xerapina to leave on monsters with core commander level. The boy dreamed that he would definitely break everyone's arms in this life. Our friends were approaching the land of Duke Valentia. It was one of the largest cities in the kingdom of Aslan. The knights were jubilant that they were in Valentino. This is their native land. Chloe wondered if Topini had been here before. Smilingly, the boy replied that this was his first time here. Mistress was very surprised by the now, he said. The Emperor's voice rang out across the square. A man cried out, asking his daughter if she was hurt. The boy was surprised to see the hollow-eyed Duke running to meet his daughter. Chloe dodged her father's impending embrace. The Sword Emperor couldn't understand why she was so mean to him. The girl replied dryly that people were looking at them. One must not forget one's dignity. The man, continuing to cry, asked if it was not right for a father to worry about his daughter, but Chloe replied that it was not worth it to push pity. He should apologize to the knights for worrying. The Sword Emperor cleaned himself up. He straightened up and said, as befitted a lord, that all the knights had done a good job. Thanks to them, Chloe came home unharmed. He asked me to accept his thanks, not as a duke, but as a loving father. The man added that he had already organized a feast and invited the knights to enjoy it to the full. Kneeling down on one knee, the army said it would be done. Approaching his daughter, the Duke inquired who the child was. Tiny smiled and thought that the man didn't recognize him after all. Chloe explained that it was the boy she had written about in the report. He would be a witness in the case of the Dark Magician. His father scratched the back of his head and replied that he was so full of things that he couldn't remember anything. The boy approached the gentleman and said he had something to say about Tempest. The people around them were very shocked at what was happening. Duke Valentius himself said he was a fearless boy. Here the boy experienced the Duke's spiritual pressure. After bowing to the Lord, the boy noted that the Emperor still had much to learn. His aura skill was now at the level of an aura user. Tiny thought about his friends from his past life. Astina, one of the 7 great knights, has a superior aura. Orc Zorik will likely be one soon enough. The boy decided to overcome the Duke's pressure by using the fortitude he had accumulated in his past life. Straightening out, our hero told the Emperor he could tell everything here. Chloe approached her surprised father. She explained that Tiny was ignorant because of his age. The man replied that the kid wouldn't act like that because of ignorance alone. Frowning, the Duke replied that he would speak to the spoilsport. Taking the boy to his office, the man asked him if he knew about Tempest's disappearance. The boy answered in the affirmative and said he had a guess. The Duke was still more surprised and replied that he was interested in hearing the conjecture. The boy thought, Tempest is one of the few ancient words he knows. It means time or opportunity. He might have turned back time if this jewel had gone missing a month ago. The man listened tensely to the boy. When he stopped talking, he asked him to continue. Yanni said that everything would begin with an event that would happen 20 years from now, and the boy would tell everything that would happen. After listening to the boy's story, the Duke replied that it was too well ordered. A child would not have thought of such a thing. Tilting his head, the man reasoned that he even knew the name of the great warrior of the Orcriv tribe, the guardian of the World Tree, and the first hammer of the dwarves. The boy replied that they had all been comrades for a year. The man didn't understand. How could they be comrades? They were his unfriends whom he had been fighting for a long time. The Duke confirmed what the boy had said about Tempest. It can only transport one person into the past, sacrificing the life of a superhuman. The ancestors used it very carefully and wisely. Looking out the window, the man explained that this information had been passed down from generation to generation with him. Even he had never believed in its truthfulness. The Duke looked at the boy and said he was wrong to believe he was not deceiving. However, the Sword Emperor hesitated to make that particular decision back then. He relied on the guy's talent and made that decision. The man said that if he returned, he would prepare humanity's skills to fight against the Demon King's army. But instead, he sent the boy instead of himself. He couldn't understand why. Tiny said that's what the Emperor would be like. He will always talk about saving the talent and other nonsense. He also added, twirling his finger at his temple, that at the time, he thought the Duke had senile marasmus. The man paced back and forth in the office. He said it seemed impossible to know how far back in time someone could be sent. The boy was surprised. They were using a power on him that they weren't even sure of. Sitting back in his chair, the man replied that he could not be sure about something he had never done before. But he must have told the warrior something similar. The boy would return to the moment when the impact on his soul was most substantial, to where his personality was formed. That could be what the future Duke foretold. The boy, gritting his teeth, realized why he was on the day his sister died. Von Valencius asked if he was wrong. The boy replied that he was entirely right. He realized the Sword Emperor was not to blame, as he had thought, and he should be grateful that he could see her again. The Sword Emperor said he had one last question. The last one was just to track down his current one. He had to tell the guy something to gain his trust. The boy said his daughter's baby name was Lily. He and his wife chose it because they liked this flower. The man was quick to say that everyone knows about it. The boy added that, however, the Duke did not actually like the flower. The man's hands, previously locked together, unlocked. The kid added that this is the most essential part of the truth. The man laughed out loud upon hearing such a secret. Calming down, he replied that it was true. He could say such a thing. Even after the death of his wife, he could not admit it, so he didn't tell anyone. The Duke was distraught. He slammed his hands on the table, shouting, "It's all true!" He did not know whether to laugh or cry. The boy asked quietly if he believed him. Von Venentius clenched his hand into a fist. He said it was clear now why his family's jewel had been stolen right out of his hands in his chambers. The boy replied that he was glad to hear that, and he thought to himself, wondering if it was because he had returned 20 years ago, that the man was even more capricious than in his previous life. But the Sword Emperor said he needed more special proof, and he ordered Sir Lawyer to be summoned. Our hero looked at the door and didn't understand what it was for. The man said he was convinced that Tiny had traveled back in time, but he wasn't quite sure about him yet. Von Valentius clarified that the boy's name is Tiny, and he is one of the 10 future great knights. The man asked the kid to show a future ability that he would appreciate. The boy smiled slyly. This task was not difficult for him. Walking down the palace corridor behind his master, the boy thought, not fair. He had asked to find him, and now he was conducting some tests. He thought he might play a trick on the man. He asked if the Duke was curious about the future. Without turning around, the Duke said a lot. The boy was running around, asking whether to talk about his family. To Tiny's surprise, the man replied that he didn't need such information. The Emperor said he was interested in the foreshadowing of disaster. The man asked that they not tell him or his daughter anything. Valentius added that people grow through mistakes and missteps. He is proud to have raised a daughter who will not falter or break in adversity. Turning around, the man asked not to take away her evolving opportunity. Putting his hands behind his head, the boy said that he knew very little about his daughter and his family. At that time, the boy was trying to save himself, so he was not interested in the Duke's affairs. The man was surprised. He began to shake the boy, asking if he knew where their world would go next. In response, he heard Tiny only knew what incident would cause a great commotion. The Emperor of the Sword asked if that was all. The boy replied, What more did he want to know? With frantic eyes, the man clutched at the boy, asking if there would be people who would unite the armies he was telling about. He must know what happened before that. The Duke was thrashing around and screaming that he was insane, pulling Tiny by the ears, demanding that he remember everything soon before he wiped him out. The Sword Emperor took the boy to the jousting room. On the table was a paper. The boy wrote everything he remembered on it. Taking the sheet in his hands, the gentleman began to resent the fact that almost nothing was written on it. The Duke was angry. He said there were more than 10 misfortunes, and the boy only remembered a few. What about the others? Besides verified information, the lad had heard of other events from gossip or his comrades. The man pressed the boy, asking for more valuable information that he didn't have. Tiny's only thought was to grow up sooner. In his previous life, they had spoken to each other as equals. Von Valentius read and noted that the only valuable thing here is that the hero and the saint appeared according to prophecy and went to war. His name is Kurumbel. He's in his 20s. We need to find him soon and train him. Trying to find the right words, Tiny said the hero was 20 years old, and now he was... The man clutched his head and began to cry, asking the Lord why he had chosen to test him this way. Should he blame his future self? Or would it be better to beat the bastard, who was useless to him? A butler entered the room and reported that Sir Lawyer's Lord Hall would arrive shortly. The Duke ported to bring Drexler instead of Lawyer. Von Valentius asked me to tell the knight to teach someone a lesson. The butler didn't understand and was a little frightened. Soon, the order of the Blue Wing Vice Captain, Drexler Einen, arrived. He stood like a massive mountain in front of Tiny. He belonged to the 5th stage of the highest rank. The knight stood before the Lord and asked if he had called out. The Duke said he was glad to see Drexler. He wants the knight to test the bastard. We need to see if he has any bragging rights. Drexler was confused. He was surprised that he would have to fight a child. The Duke confirmed. The knight's mind flashed with ideas about why the Duke had called the vice captain to deal with such foolishness. He figured he'd done something wrong and was on the verge of demotion. The thought that if he lost his paycheck, he wouldn't be able to maintain his estate made him panic. Von Valentius stopped the panic. He called out to Drexler and wondered if he had made up his mind again. That was the guard's weakness. The Lord looked sternly at the warrior and instructed him to fight him thoroughly to test his abilities. The knight still couldn't figure out what his light was up to. Looking carefully at the boy, the warrior realized he had a 2nd stage, bordering on the expert rank. Drexler visually estimated the kid to be about 10 years old. How on earth had he managed to get so advanced? Meanwhile, Tiny hurried to see if he could find out which blacksmith had forged the hammer. While the knight was at a loss, the boy looked at his hammer from every angle and reasoned that it would be better if it were bigger. The headboard would have a hole, and the handle would be lengthened by an inch. The Duke pulled the boy from his musings and asked him to concentrate. If he didn't take it seriously, he would break the agreement. Drexler's orders were to give it his best shot, not to ruin the boy. Tiny was surprised by the Duke's words about breaking the agreement. The man replied that he had not promised to help, so everything depended on this fight. The boy asked if the Duke wanted him to defeat the knight. The man replied that it might not come to that. Von Valentius said that one blow would be enough. They would recognize Tiny's victory if he could give the knight a single blow. Our hero smiled slyly and said he had said it himself. The knights came out onto the scene of the battle, knight with hammer, Tiny with mace. Looking at the warriors, the Duke thought that his way of using mana was unique. Assessing the state of Tiny's aura, judging from the harness, this kid is a genius. However, is there more to it? The Sword Emperor thought that since he had brought back the guy from the future, he had overcome his limit and become an aura master. Since he ordered this boy to return to the past, he must have a great talent. What did that Duke see in him? The master once again warned Drexler to try his best. The boy thought he needed to prove himself once more, so he told Sir Knight to start the fight. Sitting down on the wolf, the boy said that if the knight didn't want to attack first, he would take the initiative. Drexler was surprised to see the boy had the spirit of a wolf. The knight, swinging his hammer, apologized to the boy and said he had no chance. The boy managed to dodge and drew his mace. Throwing himself into a tangle, Tiny looked to strike Drexler on the shoulder. Turning around, the boy realized there wasn't even a scratch on the knight. He specializes in both attack and defense. The warrior, appreciating the boy's tactics, remarked that he was entertaining. Swinging in for the next attack, Drexler said he would try to hold back so the boy would survive. Appreciating the knight's skill, Tiny decided to surpass him in speed. The two warriors fought as equals. They couldn't hurt each other. They only knocked down the building's columns. Evaluating his fighting technique, Tiny realized he was wielding a hammer longer than a sword and a half with one hand. That means he has a standard shield on the other hand. That means his defense is better. If that's the case, then... Drexler shouted how long the boy was going to dodge his attacks. The kid's a good runner. The Duke, watching what was happening, realized that Tiny was reading Drexler's movements. He didn't lose his past experience, which he had accumulated during his 10 years as a knight. The man realized that the boy was talented, but it was too early to decide whether he could do anything else. The Duke decided to cheer up the knight. He shouted to Drexler to see how long he would embarrass him. The enraged Night Spear took extreme measures. He turned to his spiritual weapons. Seeing the boy's real danger, the Duke was frightened and realized he had to stop him. He called out to Drexler. But at this moment, he saw that Tiny had also prepared to repel the attack with a spirit weapon. Von Valentius was amazed at the kid's abilities. There was an explosion above the Duke's head, caused by meeting two spiritual energies of equal strength knights. That's when the wounded kid hit the floor. Both men rushed towards the boy. The Duke shouted at the knight that he was crazy. The Duke shouted at the knight that he was crazy. Leaning over the wounded renegade, the man reprimanded Drexler for ordering him to show his talent but no bravery. Lying on the floor, the boy said he had won. Looking back at the knight, the Sword Emperor noticed a scratch on his face. Before the explosion, the kid still managed to launch his mace and scratch the man's cheek. Duke realized, so that's where he was aiming. The man started screaming that he could have been killed. Why would a boy do such a crazy thing to win a sparring match? Going up, Tiny said that he didn't die, he even won. The Duke asked if he had also been this reckless in his previous life. The boy laughed, saying, "Why ask the obvious things?" The man shouted, "What's so apparent?" The kid said that he wouldn't have achieved anything on the streets if he hadn't behaved like that. He had to win at all costs. It was because of this approach that he managed to survive. Smiling, Tiny said, far more importantly, what the Duke thought of his action, whether the boy had lived up to his expectations. The man replied that he wouldn't do that if it were him. Looking at the boy, the Sword Emperor realized that he had apparently believed in him from the future after seeing how reckless he was. Von Vinicius said he would keep his promise and give the boy what he needed most. The boy smiled and thanked the Duke, and the second he did, he fainted. Tiny woke up on a large bed in a bright room. The Duke was standing next to him. The boy asked where he was. Von Valentius replied that he had recovered more quickly than he had expected. The Sword Emperor said they had much to discuss and said to follow him. The boy asked how long he had slept. The man replied that it was almost half a day. Following the gentleman, Tiny asked if they were summoning a high-class priest to him. Just then, Chloe appeared in the hallway and sternly told her father that she had ordered Tiny to get more rest. He was just waking up, where his father was dragging him already. The girl glared angrily at her father, hoping he wouldn't hurt him again. The Duke replied that he had brought it on himself, and he would not harm his daughter's savior. Tiny was slightly taken aback at being told he was Chloe's savior. Until now, he had thought it was the other way around. Chloe shouted at the boy, saying he knew he had just woken up, having been 1 foot in the grave. The boy smiled and replied, as his lordship said it was all the fault of his overambition. He apologized for making them worry. The girl patted the boy on the head and told him not to be so serious. The Duke was jealous of the boy's daughter and began to warn him if he would court his daughter. The boy embarrassedly replied that he was surprised when the gentleman called him Chloe's savior. Last time, he didn't catch the dark mage or save the mistress. The Duke realized that this was a new experience for the boy. Chloe asked what her father meant. He replied that he didn't need to fill his daughter's head with it. He would tell her everything later if she was interested. In the meantime, he advised her to concentrate on the coming-of-age ceremony. It's coming up soon. Her father had prepared everything. She would love it. The girl slumped. Biting her lip, she said, "Okay." She turned around and strolled back to her room. Tiny watched the girl leave and didn't understand what was going on. Von Valentius took the boy into his study and gave him important advice. From now on, the fact that he had returned to the past must be kept secret. Our hero replied that he had no intention of going around shouting about it everywhere. The Duke noted that the priest should not get wind of anything. The flow of time and space is the core of the faith propagated by the Creator. Even the goddess, the mistress of all things, cannot resist this power. A simple man who goes against the established order will be called a blasphemer. That's why the Valentia family is hiding the Tempest. The boy interrupted the Duke's speech and asked, "Isn't the goddess the creator?" The man replied that he couldn't know that. This information was removed even from the sacred scriptures in the temple. Tiny was surprised to learn that the scriptures were only passed down to the ancient clans. Standing up from the table, the Sword Emperor said he needed to minimize the number of people aware of it. For example, only the 10 great knights he mentioned could know about it. The man added that, of course, there was no word about the hand of God. There was no point in arguing with fanatics. The boy said fine. He didn't plan to leave them behind. Clenching his hand into a fist, Tiny promised to make them even stronger. He would use the abilities he had mastered in the future. The master replied that it was excellent. And what were these abilities? The boy stopped the Duke's speech and asked what was wrong with the thing he wanted to give him. The man hovered a little. It was as if he didn't know what he was talking about. Our hero stretched out his hand and said, "One should have a conscience. A gentleman should first be given what he needs, or age has made a man a merismatic." Von Valentius shouted that the boy was insolent and kicked him in the head. Scratching his bump, the kid asked why the bloody old man had hit him. The man took the boy by the ear and dragged him along, saying he had to be taught manners first. Tiny, trying to free himself, explained that it had just slipped out of his mouth. The Duke, however, realizes that the boy is an adult at heart. The man replied that it was even worse. The Sword Emperor said that if he had promised, he would have to fulfill it. Our hero fell backward. The Lord loomed over him, saying he would share the special knowledge of the head of the Valentia family. The man inquired if Tiny had ever heard of the force of gravity. Our hero got a little distracted and started yawning. Duke banged him on the head again and said they hadn't started yet, and the boy was asleep. The boy shouted to the Duke to stop the beating. The Duke replied that he should listen carefully. The man said that the family's secrets were represented by 4 techniques: mana training, defensive and attacking swordsmanship, gaining the inner skills of the 3rd stage, and gaining special skills to reach the 7th stage. The boy was thrilled when he heard about the technicians. He said that the Valentius family was not considered the best for nothing. The Duke smiled, nodded his head, and said exactly that. He said that since the boy was using a striking weapon, there was no need for an attacking sword technique. The boy swung, imagining he was holding a hammer. He said that a fragile sword was no match for a strong hammer. While the man marveled at the boy's words that the sword was fragile, Tiny thought he was interested in something else. The kid was interested in the incredible defensive power he had seen in his past life during the battles of the Sword Emperor. The boy knew that the attacks and defense would become perfect with her. Our hero's dreams were interrupted by the Duke, who said that the most important of the Valentius family secrets were the techniques for obtaining internal and special skills. The boy was shocked. Von Valentius said he would teach the boy one of the techniques for obtaining the inner skill right away. Frustrated, the boy even cried out, "Why not use a defensive technique?" Meanwhile, at the meeting of the Dark Mages, they were discussing Irina's death. The head said that she was the blade that pierced the heart of Elfheim, a resource that could not be lost so easily. The head of the underground group said that Wan Hyung is the expected heir of the Morse family. He ordered his subordinates to gather information about him without the kingdom's knowledge. The companions replied that it was so, and the chief raised his finger and ordered them not to mess up. Tiny, who had already taken a few bumps in training with the Duke, lamented that the task in Karuna was more important than anything else, and Von Valentius suggested learning a technique for obtaining an inner skill. The man clenched his hand into a fist and confirmed the importance of practicing the skill. The boy replied that he already knew which skill was right for him. As in his previous life, it would be the explosion of the 3rd stage. But the Duke disagreed with that opinion. He said that he analyzed everything while he was carrying Tiny's collapsed body after the fight. It turns out that although Tiny is a child, he weighs more than many knights, and the man wondered if the boy had used some secret to make it so. And raising his index finger upward, the Duke said the kid had something to consider. The Sword Emperor said he had carried cumbersome equipment in his past life. After a little thought, the boy replied that as far as he could remember, it was indeed quite weighty. The man said that therefore, his body weighed more. The Duke explained to the boy that the more energy in the body, the more stoic the movements become. Some magicians call this law of the universe gravity. If the kid mastered it, the heavier his body, the faster and stronger it would become, and the amount of energy would increase. Looking at the confused Tiny, the Duke asked if he was impressed with the knowledge he had gained. The man explained that the result of an expert who mindlessly chose internal skills was no match for this. The boy listened, perplexed. The Duke told him that the body has a force that moves it. It's about mass. The higher the weight. Tiny listened to the part about gravity, thinking that the more he heard, the more he liked it. But when it came to mass, he couldn't help himself and blurted out, "What a load of crap." The man exploded in bewilderment. How could he have told so much, and the boy hadn't understood a thing? Von Valentius rubbed the bridge of his nose and tried once again to convey to the boy the knowledge. A force presses down on us from above. Our hero did not understand the force that presses us. He said that the Duke must have drunk too much of his expensive alcohol. After Tiny said that if it were like this, all the people would have been pinned to the ground by now, the man with sweat on his forehead covered his mouth with his hand and didn't know how to explain it to him. Not giving up on the idea of conveying the essence of gravity to the boy, the Duke started from afar. He asked why objects fall from a height. The boy replied that this was the order of things. Already boiling, the man shouted out what was causing this. The boy replied with a detached look, saying that it was happening, and that was it. What's he picking on? He's a strange guy. The Sword Emperor was pounding with rage that the boy didn't want to understand what he was telling him. Tiny picked his ear completely serenely and asked why he was making things so complicated. If something isn't clear, you just have to accept it. The enraged teacher grabbed the boy by the ears and shouted that this fool had his own views on life. Von Valentius came out, dragging the boy. He was screaming that no one would help him. He was going to fly out of here himself, and with his arm outstretched, he pulled him off the balcony. Our hero hovered above the city street. Holding the frightened kid in his arms, the Duke said he would have to learn from personal experience. Where Valentius's hand held the boy's, he felt the effects of the energy. It froze the mana. With fury, the Duke asked again why things were falling from heights. Tiny replied with a nervous smile, a little stammered, that it was gravity, and he asked again. It was gravity. Von Valentius let the kid go, telling him to feel it on his skin. The kid panicked toward the ground, calling the old man crazy. He used the Iron Divine armor and summoned a loot wolf to keep himself safe and not get killed. With a cry of "I'm sorry," the boy flopped on top of Loot Wolf. Coming to his senses, the boy heard growling and barking. He said he was really sorry, but his spirit had evaporated. When he opened his eyes, he saw the Duke standing over him. The Duke asked him if he had felt the gravitational force. As he continued to lie on the sidewalk, Tiny wailed that every inch of his body felt refreshed. The man replied that a fall from such a height would not hurt him, and asked if he could control gravity. The boy, still lying on the ground, asked what the Duke meant. He said it looked like it needed to be repeated. Despite our hero's cries that words would suffice, the man replied that he learned much faster by practice, and he launched Tiny into free fall again. The boy woke up lying in bed. He felt warmth in the area of his chest. Our hero was sitting on the bed and could not understand where he was. Chloe sat next to him and was glad the boy was awake. Smiling, the girl said it was terrific. She heard that the boy had already become an expert. This news dumbfounded the kid a little. He couldn't believe that he was already an expert. He remembered what had happened the other day and wondered if it had worked. Chloe wasn't happy with the patient. She scolded him for practicing so hard, adding that it was a great joy to be her father's apprentice, but it wasn't worth it. He bit his lip, realizing it had all been a training session. Chloe continued to tell him how great it was that he had become an expert. Everyone in the Order of the Blue Wing went crazy with the news. The boy asked the girl if it was okay that she was here. She must have a lot to do because of the upcoming coming-of-age ceremony. Mistress replied that not really. She only needed to work on etiquette, so there wasn't much to do. Tiny said, confident that Chloe could handle her question about what exactly, the boy answered, with the ceremony. The young mistress replied with a smile that she would be the central star that day. After a bit of silence, the girl asked if it was noticeable that she was worried. The boy replied that everyone she was close to had noticed it. Chloe told Tiny that he was like family to her now. The boy was shocked. The girl smiled. She explained to the embarrassed boy that they had been a family since his father had been teaching him. She suggested that he call her sister from now on. Our hero was a little shocked by this approach. The young mistress was not happy with this reaction. She began to resent that it was actually a great honor. After all, she is so-and-so, the daughter of a duke. The boy chuckled a little, covering his mouth. Chloe wondered what was so funny. Then, smiling again, asked the boy, since they were family, to keep their conversation a secret. Tiny smiled in return and agreed as well. The girl remembered and told the boy that Sir Drexler was looking for him. The kid headed to the knight's room. Around the arena, There were a lot of guys sitting on the bleachers. In the center of the arena, Drexler met the boy. He said he'd heard that Tiny had become an expert. Our hero answered in the affirmative. He asked why the man had called him. He added that what was going on was not like a regular meeting. The vice captain dropped his hammer, asked him to ignore the spectators, and asked what the boy thought about a rematch. Our hero was stunned and asked if he was unarmed. He realized that it was because of the previous sparring. The knight closed his eyes in remorse, said the fact that he lost his mind in battle with a child is unworthy behavior for a knight. Putting his shield forward, Drexler told the boy to attack and fight as he wished. He would help him get used to his new power. Our hero said that since he had offered, he wouldn't refuse, so he went on the attack. Tiny hit the knight's shield with all his might. The adult man's feet hit the floor a little. The vice captain was astonished. How is that possible? Is this really the same kid from a week ago? At the next attack, Tiny jumped and kicked at the shield. The knight retreated a few steps from such power. Tiny decided to use the mace in conjunction with mana energy. Drexler prepared his fist with a stream of energy to reflect it. A light touch of it could result in severe injury. The energies encountered were equal. Both warriors flew off in different directions from the resulting explosion. The boy was amazed at how strong the knight's fist was. The man felt how hard the boy had hit, and his fist was sore. Our hero accelerated in his attacks. Drexler was shocked at what was happening. Observers have discussed that the boy's mace looks heavy, but he wields it with all his speed. The knight did pick up his hammer from the floor, he said, looking like it wasn't worth holding back. Tiny smiled slyly, saying that he had initially been pushed for that. With a cry of "Be on the lookout," Drexler attacked our hero. As the fight progressed, Tiny noted that he was mastering more and more with each punch. During sparring, the kid realized that he should swing lighter and hit more powerfully. The boy pondered that once the Monatello got used to it, the full force could be released. After getting more comfortable, our hero swung into his first combat move, the lightning strike. An explosion rang out in the arena. The surrounding columns shattered. Dust stood in a column. The observers in the stands were shocked. The guy's eyes lit up. They said, "This is the power of an expert." Sitting in the arena ruins in the middle of the funnel, Drexler said that they had no need to spar anymore. Wiping the sweat from his forehead, our hero thanked the knight for his help. The vice captain asked if the boy realized he was giving in to him. Tiny smiled back and said he did too. To the knight's surprise, the boy explained that he had forgotten that Tiny is also a spirit summoner. The moon wolf appeared above his head. The man laughed back, saying that the guy was giving. Rising, Drexler announced that the boy had passed. The bleachers cheered. The man added, "Welcome to the Blue Wing." The boy was surprised. He replied that he had no plans to join the Order of Knights. He wondered if the Duke had told him. The vice captain's surprise was unparalleled. All he could do was shout, "Why?" Then he added, because he had even learned the Valentia family's secret technique. In the Duke's office, Tiny heard what the Sword Emperor forgot to tell his knights. He who was going to travel the world had better not join anyone. The satisfied man smiled. He said the boy had done well and exceeded his expectations. The boy remembered the horror of his training and bit his lip. Then he thanked his lordship for his help. The Duke informed our hero that the preparations to settle the first calamity were almost complete. The boy asked why almost. What else was missing? The man announced that he would craft an artifact, a warhammer for Tiny. An artifact is a weapon enchanted with magic. They come in different values. The value can equal a knight's income for several years. The boy replied with a serious look that he shouldn't have. It would take a long time to make. The Duke said it had been made for months. When the boy surprisedly asked how the man knew it would be needed, Von Valentius replied that it was supposed to be a gift to Drexler for his long service. The Emperor of Swords sent the boy to Valentino's finest forge, Rendel's hammer. There, the dwarf Rendel was surprised by the Lord's order to customize the hammer for the lad. The master was furious at the suggestion. He shouted that he would rather give up the order and pay compensation. How dare they treat his creation like a child's toy? Tiny remembered the words of Heinen, a gnome he knew in his past life, that a gnome would always find a suitable owner for his weapon, even if he had to take a loss. The boy realized he had to prove to the blacksmith that he was worthy of his hammer. The blacksmith listened to Tiny's words that he was better than a top-level knight with disbelief. The boy used his energy to show his strength. The dwarf Randall was very surprised. What he saw didn't seem like a trick. How was he at this age already an expert? Gnome's special skill was the Eye of Truth. This skill separates truth from lies thanks to the waves of emotion in the voice. When he calmed down, the foreman hummed and said, "Looks like the kid's not so bad." Then he asked him to wait a while. He placed a fine hammer on the table in front of our hero. The boy asked if he was ready. The dwarf explained that the weapon had to be adjusted to him. The boy examined the artifact and listened to the need to fix automatic recovery, hit enhancement, and defense magic. Tiny asked the blacksmith about attack magic. The dwarf wondered in response if the lovers of simple weapons were not interested in defense at all. The boy mumbled that it was not. The master listened warily to the boy's words that a hammer artifact was unusual, even rare. And only a fool would refuse the opportunity to have 3 magical functions. Upon reflection, the dwarf said that he actually has another hammer. It's made of pressed black iron and has a rune to increase weight. Because of that, it's hard to carry. Our hero opened his mouth in surprise. He was eager to get such an artifact. The blacksmith told him that the man it was intended for had refused it because of its weight. The boy grabbed the gnome's shoulder and, mesmerized by what he heard, said it was marvelous. Asked what other features it had, the master listed the automatic strike reinforcement function and self-healing. The boy asked to see the hammer. The man led him to an artifact that stood against the wall. The master smirked and said that the boy could hold it. It weighed over 100 pounds. Tiny took the weapon in one hand and tried swinging it. That hammer was indeed heavy. The dwarf was amazed at such strength. The boy was eager to test the hammer's power. He swung the hammer with both hands and hit the floor, which broke simultaneously. The blacksmith shouted that the boy would destroy the place. The boy clung to the artifact as if it were his own, saying so, and knew he was cool. The master thought the boy was crazy. Our hero thought the hammer was a little short, but it looks like the nocturne he used in a past life. The boy asked if the blacksmith could adjust the hilt so that he could use it when he grew older. The dwarf shouted that he had to pay first. Tiny said that the master could ask the Duke for double payment. The latter thought the double allowance was reasonable. The boy inquired as to his name. The dwarf, thinking, said Stamp. The Duke was very surprised that the blacksmith had a different hammer. The man said it was even better. Drexler would be happy too. Tiny said the remodeling will take 2 weeks. In the meantime, he plans to train. He didn't even think he could be superhuman someday. Von Valentius was surprised by the name superhuman. He said it was a Western word. The boy explained that because of his appearance, dark hair color, he added foreign words to his vocabulary. Many people say that he is from a clan of magicians. The man laughed and said the kid was entertaining. That was good thinking. Tiny didn't understand what it was. The Duke explained that he should use foreign words so that the interlocutors would be sympathetic to his collective hair color. Our hero was angry and thought what a disgusting character the gentleman was. Looking out the window, the Duke thoughtfully said, 2 weeks. By then, Chloe's coming-of-age ceremony would be over, and she would be gone. Tiny wondered if the man still wanted to announce it. The Sword Emperor exhaled. He's about the relationship with the royal family, and answered, could he cancel his engagement to the crown prince? Our hero tells us that the groom will die the day after the wedding. Why would the Duke want her? The following summer, all direct heirs of the Aslan royal family will die in the second disaster. Because of this, the strongest kingdom will fall apart in internal strife. The princess will become a widow. She will be called the unlucky crown princess. The slumped Duke replied that he could prevent it since he knew everything, so there was nothing to worry about. Tiny added that he knows the second robber prince will die. The boy said that in his past life, the Duke was unable to help his daughter in any way, and they do not know of any needs now. The shabby Duke replied to Tiny that his daughter was a bright child. Her character and abilities are brighter than her appearance, but people don't realize that. The kid replied that they would find out sooner or later. Although the Duke will help her, Chloe will eventually have to settle the kingdom herself. The boy said that she didn't seem happy when he met her in a previous life. Resting his hands on the table, the Duke replied that for his daughter and for the world, he would choose the best path. The man said menacingly to prevent it, or I am not Asgard von Valentius. Tiny said he'd stay out of it. But if something goes wrong, the boy will save Chloe himself. The man pounded the boy's forehead with his fist and shouted, why are you calling me so friendly? Did the boy develop feelings for her? Our hero thought that when it came to his daughter, Valentius went crazy. The man admitted that he had gone a little overboard. Many people began to gather in the streets of the city, all because of the upcoming coming-of-age ceremony. 2 men were walking down the street, reasoning that the ceremony was only a short time away. They had put all their heart and soul into the preparations, so it should work. In his office, the Duke was talking to Zenas Frivel, captain of the Blue Wing. The boy looked out the window and said that more guests had arrived for the coming-of-age ceremony than expected. The Valentius family was well respected. Turning around, Zenas said they would do their best to ensure everything went smoothly. The Duke told the captain that he had done well. The boy said that a representative was coming from the Rokters too, their vile third son. The Duke snorted unhappily. Roters, then. The Rokters are a family of dukes with significant influence in the kingdom. They have been feuding with the Valentia family for generations. The Duke asked if they had really sent him to our ceremony. He asked, reminding him that he was on Valentia's lands and not at home. Zenas replied that they had already prepared for everything. The gentleman calmed down a bit. He said he knew he could be relied upon. Duke von Valentius called out to Zenas. The boy turned, asking what your grace wanted. Looking intently at the lad, the man asked him if he happened to have the disease he had kept from him. Zenas was a little confused by such a question. He wondered why that was such an assumption all of a sudden. Sitting in his chair, the Duke said the young man shouldn't bother much with organizing the ceremony. The lad replied that it was all right. To him, the miss is like a niece. Coming to his senses, he apologized. The man chuckled, asked not to apologize. She was always following him around. It felt like she had 3 older brothers. Looking intently at Zenas, the Duke asked if he was still planning to marry. The boy was a little confused at first, but then he began to grumble that he wasn't going to, and the Duke had already promised not to ask about it again. The man turned away and replied that he had forgotten. The captain noted that the gentleman was acting strangely today. Von Valentius replied that he was just nervous about the upcoming ceremony. The Duke said that Zenas must have a lot to do. He said to go back to them and not to worry about him. Left alone in his study, the Sword Emperor thought about Zenas Frivel. He had become captain after the death of his father. The man recalled Tiny's words that he had never heard of him. He was now at the level of a challenger. There was no way our hero had never met him in his past life. The Duke's thoughts were occupied with speculation that Zenas would cross over to someone else's side in the future, if neither marriage nor illness were a reason for dismissal. In regular combat, a 6th circle mana user can't die, it comes out. Frowning at his thoughts, the Sword Emperor concluded that it was most likely about the second calamity. Tiny also thought about Zenas during training. He thought his grandfather was worried for a reason. Something would probably happen at Chloe's ceremony, and a lot of people would be involved. Chloe interrupted the boy's thoughts by calling out to him. Turning around, Tiny saw the lady walking with Vivian. The boy wondered if the mistress needed to be elsewhere. Many ambassadors had already arrived, and they would be offended that she was devoting her time to a common boy at a time like this. Chloe replied that the room was too stuffy to stay there. Vivian commented that she had tried to talk some sense into her, but alas. Chloe asked, and something was interesting to talk to the boy about, and even see the wolf. The boy asked if he could lend it to the girl for a while. In response, the girl asked, "Can I?" Moonwolf appeared next to the girl. The mistress embraced the puppy and said he would have more fun with her. Tiny watched and thought they were already friends. Then our friends heard a foreign voice. Someone from behind Chloe said it was the angel of the Valentia family. She's irresistible. It turned out to be Tebron von Roller. He knelt down and said she was the most beautiful woman he had ever met. The girl and the guard were a little embarrassed when they heard the guest's name. The boy confirmed that he was from the Roller family, which competed with Valentia in good faith. According to etiquette, Chloe was glad to meet young Mr. Tybrin. The boy asked her to give him time to make their acquaintance memorable. Chloe was confused. What opaque hints? With a wink, the younger Roller said they might become lifelong friends. The interlocutor continued, offering to chat. He even brought drinks for such an occasion. Chloe listened in bewilderment, opening her mouth. Tiny got angry. He wondered what was wrong with this weirdo. How dare he offer a drink to an underage girl who was about to be engaged? Vivian intervened in the conversation. She asked the gentleman to step aside and told him the lady could not accept his offer. She had to return to her guests. The haughty heir was surprised that the knight was a woman. He said how dare a wench stand in his way, and called for his guard, Graham. Our hero looked at what was happening and did not understand. Is he smirking? Is he some suspicious type? The boy thought it was time to prove himself. Turning to Chloe like a sister, Tiny made an immediate childlike expression and asked who the uncles were. The mistress was surprised at this behavior. Stammering, she asked, "Tiny?" And the younger Roller, pointing to the dark hair, wondered who the boy was. Guy ordered his guard, Graham, to get the boy out of here. Our hero launched an attack. In a few seconds, the boorish guy was already flying through the air. His guard, Graham, followed. He didn't understand how things had turned out this way. The guard recalled the events of the near future. The elder roller had instructed him to take Tibron away with the miss. He would make a scandal there. Graham objected to the gentleman, saying it would tarnish the entire family's name. The man turned and replied that Tibron would soon be banished from the family. Smiling wryly, the elder roller commented that settling their main problem and losing only one lowlife was an excellent result, and ordered him to accompany the lad and keep quiet about his plan, adding that he would wait for news. Our hero scattered the boorish guests across the yard. There were a couple of other guys watching from the window. One of them, amazed by Tiny's strength, exclaimed that he had put the knight down in a blow. "Who is this boy?" The other commented that he's a genius who only appears in fairy tales. No, he's probably a monster. The first person he spoke to laughed, moving away from the window. "Duke Valentius is raising a monster," he said. And he added thoughtfully that he should meet him. Back in serious condition, the guy said that all would be fine. Still, that old snake, Duke Alan von Roller, plans to keep interfering with the royal family. The second young man replied that he perhaps wanted to stay out of their sight. His goal was most likely to break the bond between them and Valentia's family. The first young man commented that it was a pathetic attempt. Can the Rollers compete with the Valentians? Many years have passed since the Duke of Valentia became an aura user. The interlocutor replied that he did not want Valentius to outdo him. The other said that it must be so. Turning back to the window, the young man said they'd have to deal with these guys first. It might as well be out in the open. The blonde-haired guy replied, not thinking they'd have to do that. The young masters of the Valentia family are said to adore their little sister. They had already returned home, and what was happening had been reported to them. Tiny stood in the Duke's study and helped himself to a cookie. The man said he heard Tibron stirring. He explained that this would prevent the boy from being caught for assaulting a nobleman. The boy mumbled with his mouth full. What a relief. This attitude infuriated the Duke. He got up from the table and hovered over the boy. He started yelling that he was just lucky. For God's sake, he should stay out of it. You don't have to swing your fists around forever. The man asked Tiny if he wanted to go to jail before the Demon King's army arrived. The confused boy mumbled that it was just those guys acting weird. The Duke sank back into his chair, saying that was correct. Tiny realized that they had expected something like that. Von Valentius's eyes lit up with fire. He said that Tybrin had gotten a beating for the deed. How dare he come near his daughter? Let him get in the Duke's face. Tiny, scratching his head, thought he'd been told to stay away. Going out into the corridor, our hero saw two angry young men rushing down the corridor. They shouted that this bastard dared to look at their dear Chloe. They were going to teach the bastard a good lesson. Tiny caught himself thinking that these were familiar faces. They almost took down our hero, so he had to push one of them away. His brother was surprised. Even though Tren was an expert, this boy repulsed him. One of the brothers took a closer look at the boy and asked, "Is he tiny by any chance?" Sitting on the floor, he asked, "Was that the kid who fought Drexler?" The boy, confused, scratched his head and replied that he had fought him, but the man gave in and did not use his soul weapon. Looking closely at the little knight, the young Duke said the rumors weren't lying. He really had a high enough level to learn their family's secret. The guy who flew off patted the boy on the shoulder and said he was awesome. The other one replied, "Sorry, they met at a time like this. But they have one thing to do right now. They'll see each other again." The brothers rushed further down the corridor, shouting how vile Tibron was. They would personally kick him out of their duchy. Looking at them, our hero thought Tibron wouldn't get off that easily. Hearing that one of the brothers' names was Aaron, the boy thought, no wonder his face seemed familiar. But who is that guy next to him? In the future, there was only one young master in their family. Frowning, our hero wondered if Zenus's fate awaited Valentius's second heir. Walking through the courtyard, our boy lamented on Aslan's royal family. The ruling family considers their Aslan clan to be the most aristocratic, so they only allow those with blood ties to them. Because of this, even within the Valentia family, few can socialize with them. It will lead to great unhappiness in the future. The boy, gritting his teeth in anger, pronounced that they were bloody aristocrats with their bloody kinship with the Golden Dragon. At that moment, the boy heard himself being called out, calling him a young knight. It was the two boys who watched through the window as the boy dealt with the mistress's abusers. One of them advised saying such things when no one was around. Our hero became wary. He asked who they were. He noted to himself that they were aristocrats. Tiny realized that the face of one of them was fake and made by magic. It was he who introduced himself, Baron Randall von Narshav. I'm here as a guest at Mrs. Coming-of-Age ceremony. The Baron wanted to meet him to hear how he had defeated the knight. The boy asked, is the boy related to the Valentia family? To the Baron's surprise, our hero replied that he was a guest in the Duke's house and his debtor. The Lord was surprised and said that the Duke was a short-sighted man. Tiny tensed. He replied that the guests were now on the Duke's lands, and it was not very kind to speak of their host in such a manner. The young aristocrat was very surprised to hear such a response from the boy. After a few seconds, the Baron laughed and said they were now even. Our boy could not understand what was wrong with his interlocutor. Smiling, the young man looked down at the boy and said they were giving each other advice like real friends. The Baron said that he wanted to buy the boy lunch in honor of their friendship. Tiny was in no hurry to answer. The guy winked at him and asked him not to say no. He offered to have fun and talk. The boy looked at the stranger suspiciously and wondered if he should pounce on him right now and find out who he really was. He remembered how the Duke had reprimanded him for being too hot-tempered and decided for now to just watch the Baron. But here the guest made a mistake. He said he had heard that Tiny was close to the young miss. The Baron had no sooner finished his request for the boy to arrange for them to meet than the boy's fist already flew into the aristocrat's jaw. Not expecting such a development, the young man flew back a few meters. His traveling companion had no time to defend the gentleman, but shouted after him, "Your Grace!" Our hero said, looking at what he'd done, that he'd get in a lot of trouble. Well, whatever. The Baron's guard struck the boy. From the surprise, our hero flew away. The man's eyes lit up with anger. He drew his sword and swung. Tiny had time to react and put his arm out as an iron shield, deflecting the sword strike. The exasperated guy was screaming that he was going to tear him apart. The boy held back the blow. He asked the knight, why did he do that suddenly? Our hero took advantage of the man's territory control and realized that the knight was at the level of a challenger. The man shouted that he would chop off his hands first. Tiny's iron divine armor was already showing cracks. The boy called on Moonwalker for help. The opponent turned around and shouted that it was impossible. The man said that he's a summoner since the kid has mana Volk. While the knight was distracted, Tiny realized that this was his chance to attack and went on the attack. Our hero gathered all his strength in his fist and hit his opponent in the forehead. Surprisingly, he didn't move an inch. The man grabbed the boy by the pecs and shooed him away like a dog. Our boy clinched up and managed to land on his feet. The knight had already brought his sword over his head. Protecting his master, Moonwolf took the blow, pushing the boy away. The next second again, the opponent brought his sword over his head. He said that the boy had already lasted a very long time. He would put an end to his suffering. When the sword was about to touch Tiny, the knight was stopped by the Baron, shouting, "Wait." Holding his abrasion-covered cheek, Baron Randall von Narshav told Ixalan that it was his own fault. Tiny took a seat on the couch across from Captain Zenas Frivol. The knight said he wanted to see Tiny, but he didn't imagine it would happen like this. The guy berated the boy for being overly suspicious. Our hero looked downcast and apologized. The Baron said he would forgive Tiny, so the matter would be hushed up. Taking a sip of his coffee, Zenas asked the boy to keep in mind that Valentino is no place for fun. If a man hides his identity with magic, it means he has permission to do so. Tiny agreed. He thought the captain's energy was frightening. He doesn't even want to object. Zenas said that people expect a lot from Tiny. And as his lordship said, if he's a little more restrained, he'll become great. The captain got up and wanted to leave. He had a lot to do. But Tiny stopped him, saying he wanted to ask a question. The boy asked who Randall was. Zenas was visibly nervous. He replied that it was classified information. Our hero suggested that he was connected with the royal family. The captain replied that he should not tell him anything. Tiny continued. He said that the night guard is on the level of a challenger. The captain asked the boy not to tell anyone about his hunches. Tiny agreed. Thinking to himself, it was clear that it had to do with Chloe's fiancé. Having settled down on the sofa, our hero plunged into thinking that, probably, this man is from the royal family. After all, Chloe's ceremony is actually the announcement of her engagement to the crown prince. A week later, on the day of Chloe's ceremony, the streets of the city were crowded. Zenas stood among the castle guests and kept order. The boy remembered reading books to the little mistress when she was a toddler. Closing his eyes, he mentally addressed Sister Chloe and told her that he would do everything he could to make today the best day of her life. The knight's thoughts were interrupted by Tiny's voice. He was standing nearby, eating, saying how delicious it was. A boy with his mouth full asked Sir Zenas what the food of the gods was. The captain told him to be quiet. Zenas advised the boy to eat more slowly. There was enough food for everyone. The boy, with cheeks stuffed like a hamster's, muttered that he was already eating slowly. The guy looked at Tiny squeamishly and said he shouldn't stuff his mouth like that, or his jaw would fall off. Our hero interjected what Zenas had told him. The boy said nothing. He thought that the boy was at an age when he should eat more to grow up. Suddenly, someone from outside laughed and said, "Here comes the young knight." It was the same mysterious Baron. He told the boy that Zenas was a busy man, so Tiny wouldn't mind talking to the Baron in his place. Our hero, getting up from the table, thought he had arrived, and he hurriedly apologized for his disgusting behavior last time. Tiny bowed and thanked the Lord for being generous enough to forgive him. The Baron replied that he shouldn't have made such a request of the boy, and noted that his strength was impressive. Laughing, Randall von Narshaw asked if he said anything rude, to hit him again. It had been a long time since anyone had done that. Our hero said yes, and he thought there was something wrong with this guy. Is he a pervert? The hall attendant asked everyone to welcome the star of the day. All guests were introduced to Chloe von Valentia and her father. The young Duchess entered the hall, accompanied by her father. They were followed by her two brothers, Tren and Aaron. The girl smiled welcomingly at everyone and waved. Baron Randall von Narshaw, who continued to stand beside Tiny, was struck by such beauty that he even opened his mouth. Taking a breath, the Baron said she was so statuesque and beautiful. Our hero tensed up. He wondered if he could let this freak talk like that. Everyone in the audience was mesmerized by Chloe. They said she was the angel of the Valentia family and how beautiful she was. The girl herself was not so happy. There was sadness in her eyes. Walking towards the throne, she thought that things wouldn't be the same after today. Tiny stood looking after his new sister. He knew she was going through a tough time. He thought he would pray for her happiness in this life. The boy let his moonwalker out to cheer the girl up. Everyone was surprised by what had happened. Duke said that it was Tiny's wolf, and the puppy was already sitting on Chloe's hands and licking her cheek. Setting the pet on her lap, Chloe commanded Luna to sit still. There were whispers in the hall. Why was she with a dog? Maybe it was just an idea. Von Valentius and his sons covered their eyes and listened silently without comment. In the next second, the cute little puppy napping on the girl's lap turned into a giant wolf, looking intently into the crowd. Not smelling danger, the giant beast lay down at his friend's feet. She stroked his fur and Lun slept peacefully. The guests exclaimed, "This is a spirit, an angel, and a divine creature." Randall von Narshaw asked if this is a real spirit form, and noted that it is elegant. Turning to Tiny, the Baron thanked him for his brilliant performance. The boy looked at him skeptically and wondered who he thought he was to thank for that. Some suspicious type. I should hit him again. The ceremony continued. My father came up and said, "He knows he's said this before, but thank you for growing up so wonderful, Chloe." Saddened, he said that if only Mother could see her now, that would be wonderful. Chloe's eyes filled with tears. She barely audibly whispered, "Father." All the knights of the Blue Wing Order stood sad. One could barely hold back a tear. Someone in the crowd asked what was wrong with them. He was asked if he didn't know the Duke's story. The Sword Emperor placed a cross on a red ribbon around his daughter's neck. The hall cheered. The officiant commands that this is the main event of the ceremony. It's time to introduce my lady's groom. The Duke said his daughter's husband would be this man, and, pointing his finger, he sent a stream of energy through the room. In the magical projection, those present saw a handsome blonde-haired young man. The hologram introduced itself, Bradley von Aslan. He said he was delighted that an angel of the Valentia family would be his companion. To the surprise of all present, the projection informed them that the Crown Prince could not attend in person on this joyous day. Looking at the image, Vivian was amazed. The guy looked like the reincarnation of a wise king. Tiny, hearing the guard's words, thought that, wise or not, he had died in vain in his past life. Again, the Baron raised his voice, saying it was time for him to speak. No sooner had the guy taken a step than our hero grabbed him by the arm and asked him where he was going. The kid said, very doubtful, that this was the time for a guest appearance. Randall smiled. He stroked the boy's head, saying he was a young knight. The boy explained that he understood Tiny's concern, but he didn't need to be wary of his new friend. The Baron gave the boy a clue. You must say Nalsa backwards. Our hero was shocked. When the Baron said it would be Aslan, his face changed, and he turned into the guy from the hologram. Waving his hand to the boy, the young man walked down the hall. The Crown Prince was mentioned, and he had personally come to the ceremony. Our hero was stunned that he even opened his mouth. He remembered yesterday's slap. He must have hit the crown prince himself. At that moment, the boy wanted to go under, so he screwed up. Our hero even wondered if he should let him die at the wedding next year. He was interrupted by Zenas, who asked him what he was thinking. The boy found nothing to say except that it was hot outside today. The captain realized what the boy was really thinking and encouraged him not to worry because His Highness had already forgiven Tiny. The young man had already approached Chloe to kiss her hand. The captain was still saying that even if the crown prince was displeased, the boy would be safe in the duchy's territory. Tiny was shocked to realize that the one who had gone against the will of the emperor, who had chosen Roller and insisted on this marriage, was the crown prince himself. It became clear to the boy that he wished to unite with Valentius. Zenas interrupted Tiny's musings. He said that his lordship had asked him to tell him something. The preparations were complete. Come see him after the ceremony. The boy went in to see the Duke. He was sitting at the table. In front of him was a paper with a stamped seal and a token. Covering a smile, the man thanked the boy for the spirit. He was able to calm Chloe down a little. The boy replied that it was nothing. He asked, "Is everything ready?" The Duke answered in the affirmative. He added that he still couldn't believe that Karun's divine artifact, the Humanitas, would disappear. A sudden attack by magical kraken monsters will leave the capital city of Ortis in ruins. Valentius didn't understand why it was the krakens that were their all monsters. Tiny replied that they would have to find out. He asked what about the warhammer. The man smiled and said it was finished. The boy said he would stop by the blacksmith's tomorrow. The next day, our hero was at the forge. He listened to the dwarf Randell. More weight, higher efficiency, and self-repairing. The master adjusted all the manivolts to customize them for Tiny. The boy took his hammer. The dwarf, looking at it, said that what you were made of was strange. The boy looked at his weapon with loving eyes. He answered the dwarf that he thought the hammer suited him very well. The master suggested the kid try a swing. Tiny took hold of the hammer with both hands and easily manipulated it. In the end, he said it felt awesome. In the evening, our hero rode his moonwolf on the road. When he encountered a night monster on the road, he easily defeated it with his hammer. The boy was happy. This is really what he needed. The kid looked at the artifact and said it was much better than he expected. Rendell should be properly thanked. The moonwolf roared and sprinted away. Tiny thought it was probably because of the moonlight. The boy shouted that today the wolf hops like a rabbit. That's great. That means they'll reach the port city of Enixon in a week. Meanwhile, in the secret society's office, the head reported that the boy had left the duchy. The conspirators sitting at the table were surprised to hear that he was riding a spirit beast, and its speed was 4 times faster than the palanquin. The chief asked where he was going. The messenger reported that the nearest town to Karun was Anaxon. The sect members were shocked by such news. The ringleader's eyes glowed with fury. He said the boy pissed him off and ordered him to take this opportunity to get rid of him. He told him to call the tamer. Our hero met armed men on a path in a dark forest. Their appearance was rather strange. The boy nonchalantly asked who they were, calling them freaks. The exasperated men replied that the guy didn't seem to realize the position he was in. One of them said he heard the boy had become an expert, but there are 5 of them here at the same level, and he believes in his own strength with only a spirit on his side. The warrior is as big as a rock and said the kids must be beaten to reach their senses. The opponents said they were Black Knights and would teach him a lesson. The crowd set out to attack the boy. The archer shot an arrow at Tiny with an acerbic grin, but the boy just pushed her away like an annoying fly. The Black Knights stopped for a moment after seeing this. They wondered if it was definitely an expert level. There's no way it could be. The gang leader shouted for the knights not to be afraid. It must be an illusion. The boy was outnumbered, and the attack began again. Our hero says they're talking nonsense, and out of stupidity, he prescribes a hammer blow. The boy struck the first assailant with his weapon. The others froze in horror. This is really the level of an expert. The man flew off with a thud, hitting the ground. Tiny said so much for the great Black Knight. Looking at the bandits, the kid said they were vermin and servants of the demon. In the next second, the Black Knight scurried about, wailing that he had misdescribed them. Chasing after his enemies, the boy shouted, "Who let them get away?" Our hero jumped off the wolf and, swinging his hammer, said he would send them to the other world. Pathetic mediocrities. Using the thunderbolt technique, the boy combined with manital energy to strike the ground. The ground opened up beneath the bandits' feet, and they fell into the crevice with a scream. Looking at what he had done, the boy, wiping the sweat from his forehead, said that he had done a great job. Admiring his hammer, Tiny said he would crush everyone and everything with it. But how did the bandits know where he was? We should have left at least one of them alive. Just then, a strange approaching noise was heard from the thicket of the forest. The tree fell to the ground, and the boy and the wolf blast fell next to it. Rising from the ground, our friends saw a two-headed troll. The monster ran at them with wild yells. Tiny looked at the troll and didn't understand why a top-level monster had appeared here. The level of monsters is determined based on how their strength correlates to human strength. For example, a level 5 monster corresponds to a 5th-round mage or a mana user of superior level who can deal with it. The boy couldn't understand why a level 5 monster would come after him. The troll swung and struck his giant axe very close to our heroes. They barely had time to bounce back. When the boy looked back, he saw the dark mage ordering the troll to destroy him. The mage was saying that the boy was worthless and hindering the organization. The mage's eyes burned with rage. He shouted for the monster to beat him until there was nothing left. Tiny jumped off the wolf. He said he was wondering where the troll came from. Turns out it was all about the monster tamer. The kid ordered Moonwolf to grab the tamer. The mage shouted that it wouldn't work, and he sent his monster back into the attack. Tiny dodged the axe. It was so sharp, and the beast struck with such power that the nearest trees fell like cut grass. The boy was scared out of his wits. The monster was on a rampage. I couldn't hesitate for a second. The monster chopped incessantly with its axe. The boy shouted that he was sick of it. The boy thought that strength and regeneration were pesky abilities enough to make a troll a level 5 monster. But our hero knew the monster's rage had a limit. He had to be patient and timed. Suddenly, the monster emitted poisonous smoke. Tiggy thought he could use some mana. The boy was on the ground, in the crosshairs of the enemy's axe. He thought that now was the moment to attack. He swung his hammer. Gathering all his strength for a tug, the boy kicked the monster in the knee, then in the stomach. The monster howled in pain. Massive wounds appeared on its body. Our hero noted that his punching power had increased, but his joy didn't last long. The troll instantly began to recover. The boy had to run again, dodging the monster's attacks. The monster tamer watched the distant battle and thought, how long will Tiny run? He would be finished as soon as the troll caught up with him. It didn't take long to run. Our hero ran into a rock wall, a dead end. But then the boy noticed that the troll's rage had diminished. The monster tamer also realized that the rage mode was already asleep. Our hero smirked wryly. It seemed he had reached his limit. Constant regeneration is very exhausting. The dark mage looked out from behind a tree. He understood what the boy wanted. At the exact second, Moonwolf pounced on him and grabbed him by the shoulder, then slammed the man to the ground. Tiny praised his friend, saying that Moonwolf had done a good job and ordering him to continue to hold the position. And he, using the lightning strike, rushed to attack the monster. There was a massive explosion. There was no trace of the monster left. Our hero approached the monster tamer and said, "It's time for a straight talk." Tiny discovered that the organization's headquarters are in the lawless city of the Alliance, where the head of the organization is also the mayor. The man kneeled before the boy and confirmed everything that had been said. Remembering what had happened to the rogue wolf from his hometown, Tiny said it was all lies. The chained dog would have been put under a speech control spell if it had been. The kid looked at the mage with a smile and said that he was quite talkative, although he was a level 5 magic beast tamer. The boy asked if they were planning to steal Curran's divine artifact. The tamer was surprised and shouted that they were not. Tiny believed it this time. Our hero said that if the man gave the name of the person responsible for the task, he would let him go. The frightened man asked if the boy would really let him go. Tiny told him to think hard. Taking his enemy by the breast, the boy began to threaten him with retribution with his hammer. When he reached the postal city of Anaxon, the boy was padding down one of the city streets. Behind him, something exploded in the sky. The townspeople looked on in bewilderment, not understanding what it was. Some suggested that it was fireworks. On his way, our hero remembered the Duke's words. Before leaving, he informed the boy that everything was ready. He would be waiting for him in the Anaxon pub. The kid had no trouble finding the building he wanted. Once inside, he couldn't believe his eyes. He will be assisted by the Sword Emperor himself. A second later, just as the man started to say that they didn't sell alcohol to children, his face changed. It wasn't the Duke standing in front of Tiny at all. Our hero took a closer look. The face had not changed because of magic. He didn't feel the presence of mana here at all. The boy stood confused, realizing that he had imagined it all. The pub's apparent regulars began bantering with the new guest. This was no place for children, much less black-haired ones. Tiny sent Moonwalker to deal with the sharp-tongued men. When they saw the spirit, all talk ended. The mugs with foam fell to the floor. Our hero said he always has to put everyone in their place. The host noted that the new guest is a summoner, so he's the customer who placed the special order. Bowing respectfully, the man apologized for not recognizing the guest immediately and invited me to follow him, pointing the way with his hand. Once in the study alone with his master, the boy showed him the token. The interlocutor confirmed that it was definitely his lordship's token. It was the sign of Valentino's secret organization, the Black Wing. Not only are her people impeccable with the sword, but they are unrivaled when it comes to finding information and networking. The man introduced himself, Black Wing Commander J. The boy realized he was in charge. He said he wanted to ask a question. As a head, he should be on the level of a blader. But Tiny doesn't sense the presence of mana. How does he hide his abilities? Our hero was surprised by the answer that the commander's mana had not yet awakened. The man said that if one tried to hide it, it would be challenging to disguise oneself like that. With a swipe of his hand across his face, he turned back into Duke von Valentius. Tiny was shocked, so it's just a simple disguise. The man answered in the affirmative. He ran his hand over his face and became Jay again. The boy sighed reassuringly, thinking he hadn't imagined it then. He asked if the Duke thought it was a little risky. Valentius stroked Jay's non-existent beard out of old habit and replied, rather tantalizingly, the Duke said the boy had better think about his assignment. Tiny was surprised to hear of any assignment. The Emperor of Swords explained that the mage Gale Anderson, who was supposed to issue the recommendation, was missing. Tiny was startled by this news. He asked, is the mage really missing? This title is given to those who have reached the seventh circle. Given that Gale Anderson can control the waves, he has no equal at sea. The man explained that they couldn't find him. He was supposed to return 2 weeks ago. Depressed by this situation, the kid said that he would obviously have a hard time getting a recommendation here. Duke smiled, said there was a plan B, and showed the token. Von Valentius said the boy needed to familiarize himself with his new identity. The token showed a sword supported by wings. Taking the token in his hands, the boy said contentedly that the Sword Emperor had chosen the right assistant. As if remembering something, the boy asked about Hazel. The man did not understand and asked who it was. The Duke was now surprised to hear that a demon follower was responsible for the Karuna incident. The boy replied that he was sure of it, since the informant's head would explode if he lied. The man pondered. It sounded like the name of either a beastman or an orc. Someone banged hard on the door just then, shouting that the gentleman needed to come out quickly. Someone came. The Duke, frowning, said he had to go. The big fish showed up. Tiny was surprised to see the Sword Emperor snooping around the pub with a tray and taking orders. The influx of customers was a big fish. The boy thought, why is this fake pub doing so well? 2 days later, the three-masted sailing ship Flaxen was at the dock. The sailor shouted that the ship was leaving soon. A stranger approached him and asked if they were going to Karun. The stranger was Tiny. The sailor grinned and asked the little customer to show his identification badge. The boy took out the token he had received last time from the Sword Emperor. Yunga was surprised, so the boy was an aristocrat. The sailor immediately asked to be honored for being disrespectful, and asked why he was unaccompanied. Our hero replied that it was all right. He's a former aristocrat, so. Young bowed and wished a good journey to the lad who had come aboard. Clasping the token, the boy walked and remembered the Duke's instructions. There was a family of aristocratic Morses. They were mistakenly recognized as followers of a demon. They disappeared 40 years ago. Black hair and eyes are traits of a mainline heir. Without heirs, they were never reinstated. Henceforth, Tiny became the runaway heir of the Moors family, the child of noble elves. The boy grumbled a little. An elf, then. He might be a summoner, but that was a bit much. Stepping onto the deck, the boy could feel the mana emanating from the ship. It was the energy of evil, and not from 1 or 2 people. Our hero was trying to figure out what they were planning. Maybe they want to destroy everyone here. As the boy passed by, a man pulled a knife out of his pocket and wanted to attack him. With the help of his mana vision, Tiny could discern this and repel the blow in time. The man screamed when the kid broke his arm. Faye on deck turned his attention to them. The sailors started yelling at the boy for what he was doing. They demanded that he let the wounded man go at once. But our hero finished off the attacker to the horror of those around him. People around began to wonder as smoke and a horrible stench came from the assailant's body. One of the passengers said he'd heard of it. It's rotten smoke. He's a demon follower. The sailors thanked the boy for ridding them of the lurking demon follower. But they had something official to take care of, so they asked him to come with them. Our hero smiled broadly, repeating officially. He took the man by the hand extended to him and hurled him at the man standing next to him. The boy began to strike down the men individually, counting first, second, third. The regular passengers got scared. They started running away, screaming. Looking around, one of them saw that all the bodies destroyed by the boy were emitting smoke. He stopped the others and explained that all these people were followers of the demon. Just then, the captain came out on deck. He looked around and asked what was going on. Seeing what had become of his sailors, he could not understand how such a thing was possible. Walking up to Tiny, the captain bowed and apologized for the hardship he had to go through. The man said it looked like a demon had bewitched his employees. He thanked the boy for his cooperation. The boy smiled and said, "What an excellent captain. And he's a good actor." At this point, our hero put his hammer into action. The surrounding people saw that the captain of the ship was also a demonic follower. The report was being played at Castle Karun on the seashore. That crew had been in charge of Flexen for the past 5 years. A boy stood in the middle of the throne room. A gentleman sat on the throne. The valet made the report. 5 sailors had low-level evil infestation. 2 navigators had expert-level infestation. The captain had a blader-level infestation. On the throne sat King Ahmad von Karun. He was shocked to hear about the blader's level. Hundreds of living people and thousands of dead people were offered to the demon. Suppose the demon these believers serve is from a high-level evil clan and can pass through dimensions. In that case, the sacrifices will only strengthen the believers. And at the same time, the ceremony would endow their clan with great power. Our hero said they are like pests. The old man said he hadn't seen them in 30 years. I must have gotten too relaxed. Turning to Tiny, the king thanked the summoner with elf blood for preventing a significant sacrifice. Ahmad von Karun had heard that a spirit had helped identify the followers. The man asked to look at it. The counselor began dissuading the king from such a spectacle, saying it could be hazardous. But the boy said that if the Lord wished, it was only his pleasure. Then Moonwolf appeared behind him at full height. Having seen the animal with his own eyes, the king said that he finally believed the boy. Ahmad von Karun announced to everyone that he had to talk to Tiny. He asked everyone to leave the hall and wait outside. The entourage was shocked that the Lord wanted to be alone with a stranger. The head of security has requested that this order be rescinded. A face-to-face meeting with an outsider. The old man calmed everyone down. He said it wouldn't take long. Everyone removed themselves from the throne room, closing the door behind them. The king called the boy a young hero, asked him not to worry about being overheard, and asked if he had lied about being a quarter elf. Our hero was surprised at this turn of conversation. Looking intently at our lad, the king said he wanted to know the true purpose of his arrival here. The boy tensed up. All he could think about was where he had made a mistake. The gentleman explained that having been in this position for so long, he had had to hear all sorts of stories. Like, elf blood can't flow in a person with black hair. The man calmed the kid down by saying that only royalty knew about it. Tiny shook his head and apologized for lying. He said he'd come here to hunt down the demon's followers. The king was amazed to hear that the boy was to prevent the theft of a divine artifact and trouble in Karuna. The man replied that, from the looks of it, this kingdom was like home to the boy. Our hero had no time to finish. Whence the king's awe. Heard back that Karun has a neutral position, but is in the kingdom's alliance. It's hard for their people to trust someone from another kingdom in conflict with the alliance. The man said the boy may have good intentions, but was hiding his identity. After some thought, the king said he could trust our hero. After all, he is a summoner with a pure soul. The boy sighed in relief. He thought to himself that even a wise king could not avoid stereotypes. Since summoners control spirits that embody magic, they naturally become the enemies of demon followers, which is what gave rise to this stereotype about the purity of their souls. In a past life, everyone thought the same thing, and now Tiny felt a little guilty. Our hero dares to ask the king for a favor. The boy asked to be appointed guardian of the divine artifact and promised to work very hard to solve the problem in Karuna. After some thought, the old man approved the boy's request. He added that he would be able to catch the demon's followers. At the king's request, a servant brought a sword and a token for the ceremony. The old man approached Tiny and said he was not a stickler for empty rituals and ceremonies, so they would omit them. The man said the boy had already proven his worth as a knight. So, handing him the token, Karuna said that Tiny von Morse was appointed as a knight hired to protect the divine artifact in the royal family's name. The boy pinned the badge to his cloak. He thought he was being knighted for the first time. In his thoughts, he turned to his sister Irina. He promised a fresh start, and this time it would be different. The king was leaving our hero when he followed him and said he had something to tell him. The guy said that someone named Hasley was behind what was going on. It was a name used by either orcs or beastmen. He asked if the king knew anything. The man's look suggested that he knew something. The king clarified, "Is the boy sure of that?" Tiny couldn't understand the look on his face. Tiny told me that the saint with the fifth circle said this before his head exploded. Von Karun turned away from the child and ordered him to tread. He needed to consider the child's words. Meanwhile, somewhere underground, the captured mage Hela was conjuring a huge osprey. Someone behind his back said that the mage was getting sick. It was the same Hassel. On seeing the beast, he said that, as expected, he was perfect and added that he would not let the plan of the child who could see through the veil come to pass. At this moment, Tiny was introduced to the other knights in Karen Castle. The warriors murmured among themselves, "He was the one who destroyed the demon followers in Flaxen. He's just a boy." A member of the Divine Artifact Protection Squad, Mason, announced that the boy was part elf. Therefore, he should not be underestimated because of his looks alone, and added loudly that somehow he'd made it through and gotten the title of knight. The following words came out loudly. This phenomenal boy had been given the authority to join and control this squad. The boy even covered his ears with his hands. After such news, the knights' faces stretched out and did not express any friendliness. The kid stood there wondering who they thought he was. Tiny remembered the conversation the day before with the king. The boy had asked if he could be appointed just like that. What if someone in the palace objected? The old man replied, "Don't worry. Karun's army had been handling Ortis's defense for hundreds of years. The divine artifact is now a mere symbol, and being its protector is a tedious job." Now, looking at his subordinates, Tiny realized that in simple words, their squad was made up of losers who had no chance to become stronger. Our hero pondered that even if there was no external confrontation, there would be carnage inside as it was. Turning to the Divine Artifact Protection Squad member, the boy clarified that his name was Sir Mason. The man looked at him unfriendly. Calling him Sir Tiny, he explained that he didn't care about the exclusive right he had been given. All that matters here is the seniority system. Our hero quickly tried on the boars, releasing Moonwalker. The boy explained, unsure of their seniority, but who had the upper hand was clear from the get-go. He's looking for the demon's followers and can use that as an excuse. With glowing eyes, Tiny asked the knights, "Did they happen to—" The terrified men shouted in one voice that they were not one of them. Our hero ordered his troops to try to serve correctly. His troop obediently saluted, putting their hands to their heads. The boy was very worried about the king's reaction to the last information he had heard. Was it possible that he knew Hassel? Just then, an unfamiliar voice sounded behind the boy's back. The man asked, was he their new star? The one who caught the demon's followers? He was honored to meet Tiny. It was Truman, the captain of the Divine Artifact Defense Squad. The man introduced himself in a friendly manner. Our hero replied that it was an honor to meet him as well. The boy saw the knight's mana level. He's only an expert. It's weak for a captain. Truman said he heard the boy volunteered to join their unit, and more sternly asked, is he interested in the divine artifact? Smiling wryly, Tiny replied, what if he did? He thought to himself, is the old man connected to the coming misfortune in Karuna? But the old man replied cheerfully that he had guessed. Since that was so, the boy had come to the right place and set our hero down at the table. After handing the boy a pile of books, the man excitedly began to tell him that the divine artifact was just a symbol. The holy power has one purpose, to ward off evil creatures. Adding more books, he continued the story. The power only works within a 1-kilometer radius, and it blocks demonic energy no higher than the first level. However, if he learns more about her, his opinion will change. The old man highly recommended reading these books, and he asked if he had heard of the promise in the age of mythological times. Truman read a passage from the book. Since ancient times, people had considered divine artifacts jewels. Listening, the boy pondered that it was not surprising that demonic energy was emanating from him. He should have overthought. And the old man continued to read, they are created by the gods, even evil hands, and those under the influence of... Closing the book, the man said it was better to learn by doing. The sleepy boy focused on the man and asked what he meant. Truman asked him to follow him, said he'd show him the real divine artifact. They walked into the central part of the castle down a narrow hallway with a spiral staircase. When he reached the double door, the old man stopped. He asked Tiny if he knew why the work of the Artifact Protection Squad was not appreciated. The boy timidly suggested that the artifacts were perceived as mere symbols. Opening the door, the man said it was even simpler. In the hall's center, the boy saw a huge Humanitas divine artifact floating in the air. The boy was amazed at how huge and beautiful it was. The old man reported that he didn't need protection. It is not clear why this stone manages to float in the air. According to legend, an incompetent person can't even touch it, so it doesn't need protection. Truman suggested that the boy see if he could touch it. The boy held out his hand, and the energy from the artifact reached out to meet him. Tiny informed the old man that the Humanitas was level 7. Without removing his hand, the boy continued to say that the blob of light that seemed incapable of harming anyone from this world had the power to repel all things foreign. Tiny sensed that the barrier was talking. The boy was surprised that he was the only one who could hear it. Was it because of his distinctive sensitivity to mana? The kid said it was glowing. Is the barrier itself an artifact? Pulling back his hands and watching it glow, Tiny realized the barrier could move. The shocked old man shouted that Tiny had just communicated with a divine artifact. Walking through the Knight's Hall, Truman told the boy he had a talent for surprising people. He had been in the squadron for many years, and this was the first time he had seen such a thing. Looking at the bigoted old man, the boy reflected that he lacked strength. But at least he takes pride in his work. The other members of the squad are not like him. Greg Simbo, a member of the kingdom's knighthood, was in the room. The old man turned to the knight and asked what business he was on. The man replied angrily that he had not come to see the captain. Looking at Tiny, the knight asked loudly, "Is he that holy half-elf?" Our hero skeptically replied that he was a quarter elf, thinking to himself that both were lies. The knight stood up in a fighting stance and shouted, "The elf who punished the dark mages. How dare he lie in the royal palace?" Throwing himself at the boy, he shouted that he was about to reveal his true identity. Tiny apathetically replied that you can't just take him at his word. Dodging the sword strike easily, the boy grabbed his attacker's arm and threw him over himself. The knight collapsed to the floor with a clatter. The sword flew aside. Lying at Tiny's feet, a member of the knighthood began to tell him that he was a silly little... Smiling, our hero said he sees that he can still talk. Is he feeling well so far? The boy retook the knight's hand and threw him to the other side. Already in the air, the man shouted that he recognized him. A shocked old man Truman was watching. The kid wondered if he should show good manners. Bowing respectfully, the boy told the knight lying on the floor that he had learned much from him. Another man, who was standing on the balcony, was watching. He smiled and noted what an interesting kid they had. According to the mana user path, our hero is at the 4th stage, above the expert level. He still has 3 stages to overcome: superior level, challenger level, controlling space with mana, and challenger level, mana user. Soon the knight's training hall became crowded. Robert Dumbbell, a knight of the Royal Order, introduced himself to Tiny. He said, "Since the boy defeated Greg, let him show what he can." Without listening, our hero slapped the knight so hard that he fell down. 2 other guys from the Knight Order, Tannen Roy and Edgar Albert, wished to fight Tiny. And they both set off to follow the first comrade. Vice Captain Randolph Granches of the Order of Chivalry was next in line. Throwing himself into the attack, he said he wanted to test the boy's abilities. In response to the sword, our hero drew his hammer. From one sword strike, the knight flew several meters away. Walking over to the knight sitting on the floor, Tiny asked him for a hit-and-run tactic for something. Moving closer, the boy asked if, since they had fought, the knight happened to know who Hasla was. Casting his eyes downward, the man replied that he had never heard of him. The kid didn't know what was going on. Nobody here knew anything about him, and he had already interviewed many people. Another man came up from the rival and said how ruthlessly the boy had massacred his opponent. Looking at the top-level knight or entry-level challenger, the boy asked, "Who else is this?" It was the man watching the contest with Greg from the balcony. He introduced himself, Captain Liam von Peterson of the Royal Order of Knights. Our hero bowed courteously and apologized for his rudeness. The man laughed and said no need for formalities. He enjoys watching young talents. The captain wondered if the kid would find him skillful enough to put up a fight with him. Tiny was very surprised. Peterson said the prize for making the boy laugh would help him gather information about Haslam. Would that be enough? Tiny thought the man with the challenger level and useful information came to him alone. The captain said he didn't know if the boy could handle his level, but he'd better be determined. Our hero thought you'd have to be a complete asshole to refuse, so he picked up his hammer. The kid replied that, okay, he'd love to, and jumped up for the first attack. The man deflected the hammer blow with his sword. The fight has begun. During the battle, the boy told the captain that if he underestimated him, big trouble awaited. The opponent reflected all of Tiny's lunges without strain. Our hero wondered if this was a defense technique of the challenger's level. Liam von Peterson is strong and steady as a rock. Such a knight is perfect for battle. After assessing the kid's capabilities, Liam recalled what he said about not matching his level. Now the man went on the attack. He smiled and said it was going to be fun. Our hero didn't hesitate to confirm it. Both knights fought as equals, enjoying what was happening. The captain reflected that the kid's technique was flawless. All he lacked was experience and level. Tiny thought that when the going gets tough, you should shift your center of gravity and attack with all your might. It's a known fact. The boy was lightning fast in his attacks. Peterson said he wasn't even a genius. He's a monster. Our hero was very pleased with the experienced knight's assessment and thanked his rival for the compliment. After a lengthy fight, the man offered to end the bout. At that moment, the boy unsuccessfully struck his hammer and lost his balance, just when he thought he could not stand on his feet. The captain struck with his sword at the exact second, and our hero flew back a few meters. Liam, smiling, asked if the boy minded. It was too much to fight any further. The tired and somewhat battered lad stood up, leaning on his axe, and thanked them for the fight. Wiping sweat from his forehead, the captain smiled and said he was even surprised at the end. He thanked the boy, too, and as a token of his gratitude, he promised to share the information of interest. Tiny was glad. Finally, something would come out. Our hero suddenly thought, left alone with the captain, what if he is Hazel? But Liam told me that there is a man named Littman. He is a member of the kingdom's order of knights, but only takes orders from his majesty. The man explained that little was known about his work, but the captain was sure that he had traveled to different places and might have known Hazel. The captain asked Tiny if he thought he should get an appointment. But then a guard flew into the conversation, shouting that the king wanted to see Tiny urgently. Entering the throne room, our hero saw a man beside the king. The old man asked to say hello to him. He said that he had found the man the boy was looking for. The king introduced Littman, a guide on the East Coast, to the boy. Our hero was distraught. How did he find him? Did he ask him to look for it? But then the boy remembered the captain's words. He was the one he was talking about. The man approached Tiny and said he was glad to meet her. Littman knew Tiny was a hero who had defeated the demon's followers and asked why the boy needed him. The boy began to ramble about how honored he was to meet the guide. The boy was nervous because the king was staring at him so intently. Inside, he was seething with resentment. If the old man wanted him to play along, he should have given him a hint beforehand. The man, who had already been waiting for several seconds for an answer, tactfully interrupted the boy's musings. The kid had no choice but to make it up as he went along. Because of his appearance, he thought he might be from the East Coast. Tiny continued. His Majesty asked the boy what he wanted, and he replied that he would like to visit this place. The boy did not expect the king to arrange it so quickly. The man smiled. He confirmed that King Karun did not hesitate when it came to rewards. Littman said that he was generously gifted every time he found a new path. His Majesty warned the boy not to head directly east. He had to fulfill his promise to the demon followers first. Bowing respectfully, Tiny replied that, of course. The boy wondered why he had mentioned them. Looking at Littman walking away, the boy wondered if the king suspected him. The boy looked at the man with his mana vision and saw that he was fine. This made sense because otherwise the Moonwolf would have rebelled, smelling the demon's followers. But our hero realized that it was a mana form. In front of him was both beast and man, one and the same. He remembered that's what Jay had said. The name Hazel belonged to either an orc or a beastman. Looking away, Littman said, "What a confident answer. The boy is very reliable." The king informed Littman that he would be of great use in destroying the demon's followers. The guide wondered what the sire was getting at. He had to leave tomorrow to search for Gale, but the king ordered that he cancel. Ahmad von Karun said that dealing with the looming threat is a priority. Right now, the most capable person the king can put in charge of that is Littman. Taken aback, the man replied that he understood the master. He was very worried about Gale, but he would follow his orders. Tinny oversaw the guide. No evil energy was coming from him, but the man was obviously hassling. When Littman left, the king asked Tiny how he was doing. The boy said he didn't look like a demon follower. The master said he understood, but it's still best to be sure. Tiny should check him out. The boy wondered why the king had not spoken of him before. Saying that he had no choice, the old man put his hand to his chest, and our hero saw a glow. The boy realized that it was a manacle. Von Karun confirmed it was about her. A mana oath is an oath sealed with mana. Anyone who breaks it will suffer a shock at the level of their circle. Tiny understood that a level 3 shock wasn't that dangerous, but for an elderly person, the boy asked, "Why did the king go so far?" Our hero said that Sir Littman had been loyal to Ahmad von Karun for many years, and this was only the second time he'd met Tiny. And yet, the old man told me that in the Karun family lineage, they developed a strange ability to foresee the future as the relatives aged. The king has dreamed several times that the artifact will be stolen and a monster will destroy the capital. And then Tiny came and told me that the artifact would disappear. I wish it had been a stupid old man's dream. And if there is a chance to avert disaster by doubting a loyal vassal, the king will be only too glad. Our hero heard the moonwolf barking. He could not understand what the spirit meant. Turns out Hassel had just left the castle. A moment later, the boy riding the moonwolf was already rushing after the man. Tiny reflected that the spirit hadn't sensed the demonic energy either. The real Hassel must be someone else. The boy couldn't understand why Littman just took off and ran away. Rushing into the night, the boy was already sure the answer was obvious, but he had to get proof. The port was bustling with work on reloading some crates during the night. The chief among the sailors told the boys to be quiet. Why do they think they are working at night? Then the sailors became alarmed when they saw someone approaching them. When the man removed the hood from his cloak, the boys recognized him as Hazla. The sailors stood at attention and reported expecting the gentleman tomorrow. Why is he already here? Throwing off his cloak, the man reported that something had gone wrong. The king had ordered me to stay with that boy. The head sailor said that the boy had only recently come to them. The man replied, what was he thinking? Hassel shouted that he'd had enough of the chatter as if awakened from his thoughts. They had to get ready to leave. The subordinates scattered around the pier, carrying the load with double the effort. The next second, the ship exploded. Hassel and his accomplices were very surprised as they watched the ship go down. A boat was heading toward the shore, with Tiny standing in the stern.